Welcome to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Rebound Spencer. And Klingon had something to do that. He was standing in the paint to deter it. This is Spencer. Down the arc. Gives to the cutting Klingon, and he fires it down with two hands. What a feed by Spencer. Great pass. UConn has 12 assists on their 24 baskets. And Klingon, 22 points.
Career high.
10 for 10 from the field.
Sixers lead by 18. Batum with the ball. Joel posting into the lane. Gets it on Davis. And now shoots it from 15. Rimming good. Boy, that's a clash with two premier big men in the NBA. Embiid now 9 of 15, 25 points. Sixers by 20.
Clippers' backs are against the wall. This is a huge possession. Jackson to the rim. Layup. Got it! Timeout called by the Clippers. Reggie Jackson with 35.
Career high is 55. It'll be on the left hash. Angle right. Snap. Scales. Put down by Gill. Right foot. Cairo Santos to the uprights, and it is good from 55 to hold Trenton Gill. Cairo Santos 08 snap, right hash, angle left. Santos the kick. Santos is good from 30 yards.
Good morning. Welcome in to Hurrdat Sports Radio. I'm Ravi Lulla. Andrew Rogers is back.
Hey, man.
What's going on, buddy?
Hey, it's good to be back.
It is good to have
I listened to you guys on the 7-hour drive home yesterday.
I'm glad we could take up almost half of that for you.
Yeah, pretty close.
Help you out a little bit.
Although
there.
I was skipping through commercials because I got on the road at like 7:45.
Oh,
so
gotcha.
it was only about, which is a plus because I got to listen to you and Mike Sauter versus the background music, which I understand why our listeners highly dislike that music, Shane, because I was paying attention to some of the points that they would bring up of like, hey, it gets really loud here. And then, all of a sudden, like, it's like an alarm clock and like, I'm just doing my work and boom, you're hit with the music. And I found out like, yeah, there were times where it was a little quiet and then poof, it just hits you like a truck.
Oh, come on, Shane.
Yeah, maybe we can work on that, Shane. Maybe so.
I have this dream of, then this would be a lot of work for both of us, of putting together, how in like the previews for movies, they have those like movie trivia things. And like, if we just did like a bunch of sports trivia and we filled the
entire break,
the commercials with that, like I feel like that'd be kind of fun.
Yeah, you click the answer to skip the ad or something.
Yeah,
like, I know YouTube does that, so why not?
I don't know. We'll figure something out. We'll work on it.
Seems like a lot more work.
Yeah, it does seem like a lot of work. I'm sure that will not be
right,
the
Shane.
Answer. Unless Shane just wants to do it all, that would be fine.
Good morning.
He didn't say no. I'm going to take that as a yes.
No, good morning is a no. If you know anything about Shane, good morning is a no.
No. It doesn't count if Bo says it, Shane.
Is it a double negative? Does that mean yes?
No. Good morning. No. Yeah, that's a yes. That's a yes. We are live this morning on AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, and we, of course, are on YouTube and Twitter, as our guy Andrew Rogers was mentioning. No ad skipping here. You got to support our sponsors. Sorry, guys. But we've got a terrific show for you here today. We will talk to our regular Tuesday guest, Mike Schaefer, at 9 a.m. from Husker 24/7. But at 8 a.m., I'm very excited about this one. I love talking to Adam McClintock pretty much any time, but this is the best time of year to talk to Adam McClintock when that carousel gets a rolling a little bit in the coaching cycle. So we'll talk to the college football professor, Adam McClintock of Matrix Analytical, here in about an hour. And then we'll wrap up the show with Aaron McMann. He covers Michigan for M Live. They've got the Big Ten Championship coming up here this weekend. We've already talked to Iowa yesterday with Scott Docterman, and we don't need to hear from Iowa anymore. Nobody.
Remember when Nebraska had a chance to play in the Big Ten championship game?
Weirdly, not that long ago. It was in November. It doesn't feel like it, but it was a thing that happened this month. Still.
Yeah, it wasn't the first game of the year, like Coach Will said.
Hey, everybody's
everybody's a favorite.
Everybody's undefeated this year right now. So we'll talk to Aaron McMann. Really interested to see about some of the, kind of the return of Jim Harbaugh is a big storyline here. Probably a bigger storyline than the game itself, because I think everybody expects Iowa to get boat raced.
He didn't leave. Like, why are we making this a big deal? He didn't go anywhere.
No,
he just had to sit at home.
I think it's more just he's back on the sidelines. And I'm just curious if they think it'll make any difference, right? Because
if they lose to Iowa because he's back on Michigan
it'd be a little
that
hilarious.
Would make my entire month.
Here's the problem is I think Michigan, I want Michigan to lose so they don't make the college football playoff. But do I really want Iowa to be Big Ten champs?
Well, yes. Yeah.
I don't know if I do.
You know what? This is the point in time where you root for that one team to beat Michigan. And that one team to beat Michigan last week was Ohio State. Were you rooting for Ohio State? You never want to root for Ohio State.
No, I was, though. I was last week.
But you root for Ohio State. Same thing with a week prior to that. Were you rooting for Maryland? Like, you don't want to root for another Big Ten team.
I'm okay rooting for people
rooting for the rival is much harder.
Iowa's different.
But if Michigan were to lose, think about, like, the national perspective on how that hurts Michigan on the inside, right? Like, as much as it benefits Iowa, what does Iowa get out of this? They get absolutely nothing out of it outside of beating Michigan,
they get
right? They get a top 2 win in college football.
It would be Kirk Ferentz's only outright Big Ten title. He has not won one.
Let him have it.
I don't think he deserves it.
Let him have it. If it means if it means Michigan losing, let them have it.
Here's the other problem, though. If
Iowa gets a vocal voice out of it, though,
they
will be more vocal.
They're
the key. Already vocal.
No, can you imagine? If they end up 11-2 with a Big Ten title and they're the ones that beat Michigan? They will never shut up. And if I were them, I wouldn't either.
Guys. We live in a world.
And just the opposite.
We live in a world where Nebraska fans don't shut up about the championships that they've won.
I know.
Who cares?
And
everybody has their win. If they get it this way and Michigan falls off the map, I'm cool with it.
And just the opposite, though. Michigan will not have a vocal voice if they win. Because they'll just be like, well,
which will be fantastic.
I don't care. Yeah, I don't care about Michigan.
Because we were supposed to do that anyway.
I don't care about Michigan.
Their mindset.
What I do care about is there are enough Iowa people in my life that it would not be pleasant for me.
You know what? Come up with something different for them.
I don't know. I mean, I could go 0 natties. We got 0 natties for Iowa. I don't even think they have any fake natties. 0. They're not even Texas A&M good to have one in 1939. They got the fake.
That one was really real.
I love like Auburn, I think it is, claims like 7 national titles. It's like, no, sorry, Auburn. That's not a real thing.
I know.
There's so many SEC schools that have like a dozen national title years plastered on their stadium. It's like none of those are real. Like, you made those up. Those are
wait a second, 1912.
Yeah, it's like you played 3 games that year. 2 of them were against the YMCA. That's a real thing. There's this account on Twitter or on TikTok, and I can't remember who it is. I think it's a Barstool guy. It's the guy that I was sending you the videos of every time like a new Michigan scandal would something.
Yeah, sure.
He does this kind of series of ridiculous national title claims, and they're all from like pre-1970-ish, because half of the schedules back then, again, sometimes they'd play like 4 games and then crown themselves national titles. Before 1948, there was no AP poll really. And there were like other systems that people claim national titles with. But you go back and look, like everybody knows the like the Georgia Tech Cumberland score, like the 222-0. That type of thing was so much more common because the reason that happened is because Cumberland didn't have a football team. They were scheduled that game. Cumberland disbanded their football team, and Georgia Tech held them to the contract. And so they had to just like bring a bunch of dudes and play Georgia Tech in football.
Yeah, this guy's a shoe shiner.
Yeah, well, it was like baseball.
He's our quarterback.
It was like baseball players. It was just like random students. It was like an intramural team, and they went and go play Georgia Tech, who was good at the time. And so yeah, they lost by 200. But that kind of thing pre-World War II was incredibly common. So anybody that claims a national title pre-1948, it's a no from me. We're not counting those. So I'm looking at you, Texas A&M. I'm looking at you like half the SEC schools. Notre Dame, I'm looking at you a little bit. Like half their national titles came like pre-1940. Looking at you a little bit, Notre Dame. I'm just saying. It's
so okay.
It's a little sus.
Answer this for me because I haven't done the research. Is there another school that also claims like the 1937 national championship?
Yes, I'm usually.
So are there like 4 schools that claim that they've won?
Yes, usually pre like 1950, there's like 4 schools that will claim a national title every year. And I'll look it up right now, but it's so dumb. Some of them have like 3 losses. They played like 9 games. They were like 6-3, and they're like, we're national champs. Even in like, I think it was either 1969 or 1970. It was one of Texas's national titles that like just Richard Nixon, the president, was just like, you're the national champion before they played their last regular season game. Like they still had to play Arkansas, and I think they either lost that or they lost the bowl game. And they're just like, no, we're national champs. The president said so. It's like, I don't know that the Prez was real like dialed in on college football that year. You know what I mean? Like he's got some other things he's busy with. I'm not even totally sure like all the AP voters are as dialed in on college football as I want them to be. I'm not necessarily being like, yeah, hey, Mr. President, can you name a national champion for us? That'd be terrific. Like nobody asked him to do that. He was just like, you're the national champs, Texas. And they're like, cool.
Do you want to come to the White House?
It was just a total like Wild West of national champions
Texas is a powerful player.
Like 1970, which by the way is the first one Nebraska won, so that one's real.
Well, speaking of Texas, TK said 2 teams he can never root for in any circumstance: Iowa and Texas. Which I get. Look, I understand it, but
yeah, the Iowa one's tough for me.
So the reason I'll draw a comparison to a team that I love, the Cardinals. If I had to root for the Cubs, like that would be extremely hard to do. Like I feel like I'd rather spend my entire night puking than rooting for that team. But if they were playing the Houston Astros in 2017 or whenever when they were caught cheating,
sure. Yeah,
I'm rooting for the Cubs.
Yeah,
like I'm rooting for the team that is going to beat the cheater, and that's the example that we have here. We have the cheater and we have the non-cheater who I hate.
Yeah, I'm
not rooting for the cheater.
You're making a good point here with the cheater. I don't have an argument against it. I just can't bring myself to do it.
Hey, look, I'm not going to say that I'm an Iowa fan now, right? Or a Cubs fan or whatever.
Big Iowa energy.
All I'm saying is I'm not rooting for the cheater.
Yeah. No, I get it. That's fair.
And as a 23-point dog, can you imagine beating the cheater?
No, I cannot. I don't think they're going to, but it would be.
You're innocent until proven guilty.
If there's any time in which I would root for Iowa, it would be in this specific scenario. And honestly, pre-Big Ten, like pre-Nebraska's time in the Big Ten, I didn't root against Iowa because they hardly played and it didn't matter. And like, I weirdly kind of liked Brad Banks a lot. Like I enjoyed,
sometimes you just have those.
Yeah,
guys that pull you in.
I kind of like gravitated toward him. And I thought he should have won the Heisman instead of Carson Palmer. Like I thought he was a really good player. And then they got boat raced by Carson Palmer and USC in the Orange Bowl. So whatever.
Did Carson Palmer end up playing in the NFL?
He did.
Was he pretty good?
He was not bad. 1910, we have 4 national champions: Auburn, Harvard, Michigan, Pittsburgh.
Harvard claimed a national title.
Listen, Harvard was a juggernaut at this point.
Oh, were they?
Yeah,
they were just claiming national titles because they were smart.
No, because they went like 9-0-1 every year because only like 12 teams played college football. Michigan 3-0-3 claimed a national title that year.
Nice. They had 3 ties.
Yeah, 3-0-3. They went 1911, also 4 national
Give me a
champions.
team that had a losing record that claimed a national championship.
I'll see what I can. You keep talking for a minute. I know you wanted to talk about some of the Nebraska player retention, because we're going to talk about transfer portal quarterbacks in a little bit, but you were texting me last night about the retention of, and I think some guys will end up entering the portal, but that was something that you were kind of interested in.
Well, no one has right now.
But I think at some point we'll have some.
Rule, like, he put his money down. He said, I bet most guys would want to stay here.
Yeah.
And play for Nebraska. And that is just credit to the culture and to the standard, because there is no one out there that is a part of a losing team. And 5-7 isn't the worst of the losing teams.
Sure.
But in a season that Nebraska did not hit the expectation that was kind of like reworked mid-season, there are a lot of players that would be like, I'm fed up. Like, how did we not pull this off? Like, some of it had to do with coaching, some of it had to do with turnovers, some of it had to do with game management, whatever. Like, you can attribute that failure to something. But the fact that everybody has remained on this Nebraska roster is just credit to the hold that this coaching staff has on them. And that's not saying like, hey, like, I control like what you're about to do. What I mean by that is, no, this is a family that you don't want to leave. This is an environment that will succeed if you stay long enough to be a part of it, and you don't make a rash decision to just leave because you're like, hey, I can win somewhere else, because that's not guaranteed. But what you did see at Nebraska was progress. And if progress goes from, hey, new head coach to a 5-win season to a full off season again, where, the staff and the players can do, some self-reflecting, some self-evaluation on how to get better in certain moments in the game. Like, this team was 4 minutes away from being a 7-8 win team, like 4 minutes of game away from being an 8-win team.
I think that's fair.
Like, there's so much to take away from this season on the positive side, which is why these guys want to stay. And they want to stay and play for somebody that cares for them.
Yeah, I think that's the big key right there.
And that is Coach Rule and this staff. Like, they care for this team. Now, it starts at the top, because you still have these coaches speaking like Coach Rule. But when you have look, I'm going to use a religious scenario here, but when you have somebody that is like Jesus, right? And then you have his apostles, right, that are spreading the same message that Jesus wants you to spread, like, that's Coach Rule. And his apostles are everybody on the staff, and then the disciples is the team, right? And yes, everybody's buying into that one person's message, but it doesn't matter who spreads it.
Right. Because
you're still going to listen, because it came from the ultimate caregiver.
Sure.
And that's Coach Rule in this scenario. It shocks me that nobody has entered the portal yet. Like, I will consider that a surprise, because you'll get that eventually.
Yeah, you'll get a handful.
At some point, you're going to bring people in.
Yeah.
And then people are going to be like, oh, he's after my job. I'm going to go somewhere else that I know I can play. But
that's natural.
Up until this point.
Yeah.
When you have been hit with so much failure late in the season, where it's just easy to kind of give up and go, and the fact that they've been able to stay and be retained, it is just a credit to the staff, and it's a credit to the player making that decision on his own right now.
Well, I think there's a couple things that you're seeing there. I think you touched on several of them. So, number one, it is about the culture, right? The culture of caring for each other, about being selfless, about being open and honest and transparent. If you know what you're getting into in a situation, you're much more likely to stay if you decide to be there in the first place, right? So I think that's something that you saw, I think, way more attrition on the front end than you will on the back end. Because I don't think these players probably got anything from Coach Rule and staff that they weren't expecting to get. And that helps a ton in retention. The second thing is, I think there's this idea that, hey, if you do X, Y, and Z, you're going to get an opportunity. I think a lot of coaching staffs kind of, and we saw it with Frost and staff, is they'll kind of pigeonhole guys into, that's not a guy that can play for us, or this, like Mekhi Bayer is a great example, right? Didn't think he was going to play for Nebraska ever, wasn't even sure if he could play at this level. All of a sudden, staff change. He goes from total afterthought to major contributor on defense, right? When guys see that and they see, hey, we are going to get a fair shot, because that's all most guys want, especially if they're the kind of guy that would have stuck around in the first place. Most guys just want a fair shot. And if they feel like they got a fair shot and they still are not the starter, most guys can live with that. It's when they don't feel like they got a shot in the first place that you see guys leave and you see them move on to different opportunities and different schools and things like that. I don't think you're going to get a ton of that with Nebraska. What you'll get is eventually, as the talent upgrades, you'll get guys that say, hey, I would just like more of an opportunity to play somewhere else. I get that I'm not probably going to crack this rotation here or whatever. And Coach Rule will help those guys find homes, because he said he'll do that. If this isn't the right place for you, then we'll help find the right place for you. Because you don't want, it's like when you're in a relationship with somebody, right? Like, you don't want to be in a relationship with somebody that doesn't want to be in a relationship with you, right? That's not good for anybody. Even if you can convince them to stay, like, long term, that's not going to work, right? And so you want guys that want to be there. And when guys want to be there, they understand what they're getting into, because Coach Rule and his staff are pretty honest and pretty upfront about, hey, this is what you're going to get here. And if that's not for you, it's okay. No hard feelings, but we should probably find a place that is for you. And so I do think you'll see some, that's just the nature of it. Like, I expect Jeff Sims to graduate and move on, right? Because I don't see any world in which he's the starting quarterback at Nebraska next year.
I don't see a world where he's the starting quarterback at another university.
Maybe not Power 5. I bet he could drop down.
Yes, he could. Okay, well,
like a group of 5, I bet he could drop down.
Why I say that is it's not a guaranteed job.
No.
He did him no favors this year by giving him a guaranteed job at the next stop.
And
if he chooses to play, even if it is D2 or FCS or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Like, he'll have competition for that role.
I bet he could walk into an FCS job and get and be guaranteed the job, basically. I don't know if he could do that anywhere in the FBS. I really don't, after what he's shown this year. There's probably some group of 5 schools that would give him that opportunity, but probably not very many places he actually wants to play, if we're being real. So that's going to be really interesting to see what he does, but I expect him to move on. I expect them to bring in, I think it's going to be 2 transfer quarterbacks. I think they're going to bring in a guy they think they can be their starter, and I think they're going to bring in a younger guy they think they can develop. Not that I've heard anything, but an example of a younger guy would be like a Zane Flores, a guy that's only been in college 1 year, that hasn't played yet, a guy that probably wants to be here, theoretically, he's from the area, understands the place. And I don't know anything about that. I know people get like real excited about Zane Flores. That's just an example of a guy that would make sense in the developmental role. Some guys that would make sense in some of those other roles, I know we're going to talk about here in a little bit, because they're starting to get some names trickling out into the transfer portal, and there's a
lot of quarterbacks out there.
A lot of quarterbacks. There's always a lot of quarterbacks, right? But I think here's one thing that I think we're going to look for, more than starting experience, more than the ability, like their physical abilities, more than any of this, and we'll get into quarterbacks here in the next segment, is I think the thing they're going to be looking for most is all of that intangible, emotional, and mental stuff that is so important to this staff. I think they can deal with just about everything else as long as they're not hyper turnover prone. Because that's
where I was going. As long as they don't turn the football over a ton. That's the big if. But if everything else can come with it.
But if they're bought in on all the off the field stuff, those are the guys that I think they're going to go after the most. By the way, 1921, 6 national champions, including your Iowa Hawkeyes. Fake national title, Iowa, doesn't count.
Did they have a losing
They did not, but they share that title with Lafayette, Vanderbilt, Cornell, California, and Washington and Jefferson. That's not a real school.
We will be back. will be back.
I'm back in Aggie land. I'm back. I'm back in Aggie land. I'm back where I belong. I'm back at a place where we considered home for 4 amazing years of this coaching journey. This is a special time to be the leader of this great football program. From the moment I came down here back in 2018, I've been blown away by this place. Okay, resourced as the premier football program in the country, supported by the 12th man, the absolute best fan base in the country. A football program and university rooted in tradition that links all of our former students like no other university across this great nation. Okay, I was told very early on here in my time that Aggies take care of Aggies. And since then, I've seen that play out time and time again. This place is special. The people that have been through here is special. We are going to continue to do special things.
We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Welcome back to Hurrdat Sports Radio, where we're looking at very old national championships that definitely aren't real.
Talk about the one with Notre Dame got the national title, but another team claimed it and lost to Notre Dame.
Yeah, so USC went 10-2 one year. I'm trying to find the year. They went 10-2. Notre Dame went 9-0. And so this is 1929. USC went 10-2. Notre Dame went 9-0. Pittsburgh also went 9-1 and claimed a national title. But, Pittsburgh lost to USC, so that obviously doesn't count.
And Pittsburgh had one selector that year.
USC went 10-2. Notre Dame went 9-0. One of USC's losses was to Notre Dame. And USC's like, no, we're national title. We're national champions still.
That counts.
Anything, that's what I'm saying. There's no officially recognized national titles, even though the AP existed. It was a cluster. There are no officially recognized national titles until 1950. So if you're claiming a title pre-1950, all you're telling me is you haven't done anything in 75 years. That's all I hear. Right?
Well, PD voted for Pittsburgh that year. That is the police department.
There's like, I mean,
the police department of the world.
Look pre like 1950. There's like 15 different selectors.
Mm-hmm.
It's absurd.
Well, and you know what? Frankly, if you have like the majority of the selectors, then I think you should win it.
Well, but some of them are like total nonsense. Like some of the selectors are
I don't care. I don't care. The whole thing is nonsense. So if we're going to stay in the nonsensical world, give me every abbreviation possible, and I'm going to give it to you.
I'm Googling right now what college football team claims the most fake national titles.
And I'm sure there is an article out there.
There has to be. Oh, terrific. We've got one from, this was like peak pandemic. ESPN must have been bored. We'll get to that later. What I wanted to get to, that's going to be my in-break reading all show. What I wanted to get to today was, or after that last segment, was the transfer portal quarterbacks. You were talking about how the culture of Nebraska has allowed it to retain most of all their players so far right after the season. I would imagine for Nebraska, you'll see more transfers in the spring period versus the winter period because jobs
makes sense.
Jobs will start to shake out, right? Because usually, I feel like you leave in the winter period if either it's been crystal clear that your job is gone, or if you're unhappy in your situation. I don't know that outside of Jeff Sims, I don't know that applies to just about anyone else on the team. Because like clearly his job is gone. And so I'm sure there will be some attrition in other places. I'd be pretty surprised about like impact guys transferring.
Well, and at least at the quarterback position, this is where I was kind of thinking about it last night, because yes, Coach Rule is all about, Rome wasn't built in a day.
Mm-hmm.
He's development over the in and out fast food restaurant of the portal. And I was reflecting on my couch and I thought, I wonder how Husker Nation actually feels about this, because the majority of people are like, get me a portal quarterback, get me somebody that wins football games. But the staff has leaned more to, no, we are going to focus on development, having a homegrown roster.
I do think quarterback's a little different.
But is quarterback only different because of what we saw? Because in the spring, it was, hey, Harburg and Purdy, like they look really good, or at least Harburg, because Purdy was injured majority of the time. But like Harburg looked really good. Jeff Sims is going to come in and he'll get the starting reps right away. But then you saw Harburg a little bit and you're like, oh, wow, see, this is what we talked about, like, that development that they were working on. But then as the season kind of progressed, right, you saw like Harburg was kind of like falling into the mix of, maybe he isn't as good as we think he is. And then Purdy comes in and it's like, hey, it's a splash of brilliance, but the splash of brilliance was built on what? Like, the sand, and I'm trying to find some water to pack in to make my sandcastle. Like the floor was so low and the expectation was so low that when you got that bright spot, it was just like, oh, okay, this is nice, but this isn't sustainable. This isn't somebody
Purdy on a curve.
Yeah, this isn't somebody that's winning you football games against the top teams in the Big Ten. So, that's why I kind of like sat back and thought, like why would that be like considered different? Is it only because we know? Or like, should they be still focusing on development because it was only year one and they should be working with those guys again who just got those game reps and they can feel good about where they're at? It's kind of like a weird spot, but ultimately where I landed was you have to bring somebody in that has success in not turning the football over and has had a lot of game reps. You need somebody that's played a lot of football. Like that, I think, is the two most important things right now. Somebody that has a lot of games on their tool belt and somebody that doesn't turn the football over.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things that I think make quarterback different are nothing works on offense without a quarterback that's at least functional, right? You can afford to develop and hide, maybe you've got a guard that you don't feel 100% about. You can scheme things up a certain way to send help his way with, tight ends or blockers in the backfield, or, you can run away from his side of the line as much as possible. Like there's things you can do to get around, say, a guard you don't feel great about. Or if you've got some receivers that don't, we saw this with Malachi Coleman and Jalen Lloyd and some of the young guys, they're not real comfortable running some of these routes. We're going to stay in their wheelhouse there. Or, on defense, if your secondary is like, this guy's not really comfortable on an island, you can kind of roll help his way over the top. Or, there's things you can do at almost every other position. It's really hard to hide a quarterback. And so, yeah, you can hand the ball off a ton, but you still have to be able to pass some, even if you go with what I wanted this year, which was like 12 to 15 pass attempts a game. That's 12 to 15 opportunities, which is, by the way, more than any wide receiver gets most games. It's as much as some running backs get, especially in this Nebraska offense. 12 to 15 carries was about what you could expect from the top rusher from running back all game. Your top tacklers are going to be 12 to 15 tackles a game. It's so hard to hide a quarterback that I think that's one of the things that makes it different. The other thing is, if the defense is as good as we think it can be again next year, you're getting a lot of guys back. Yeah, you have to figure some stuff out at linebacker, but defensive line, really good shape. Secondary, I think, is going to be in really good shape. You get Tony White back, we think, you're going to be in really good shape. You almost owe it to your team to find somebody more competent than to make them suffer through another unknown season of quarterback play. Even if it's somebody who is solid, not spectacular, that's why I think you need to bring in two guys. I think you need to bring in a guy that is like rock solid, maybe like a Will Howard type from Kansas State, somebody like that, where it's like, hey, is this guy going to win a Heisman? Absolutely not. Is he going to be all Big Ten? Probably not. Is he going to keep us on the rails for most of the season? Yes. And then if you want to bring in some a developmental guy, obviously you've got Daniel Kalen coming in as a high school guy that you want to try and develop.
And he'll probably be a part of that early signing period.
Yeah, I believe he's supposed to enroll early. But if you are going to be a developmental program, that's fine. But I think there's parts of the team that are too far advanced right now to make them suffer through not at least having a chance at the quarterback spot, which is kind of what we saw this year. Now, obviously, that's not what they planned for this year, right? Because they thought Jeff Sims was going to be different and be the guy, and at least be the guy that we saw at Georgia Tech, right? And he wasn't any of that. He turned into something else.
Yeah, but there was still inconsistency in his game when he got here. Like
there was
people that was noticeable.
But you
have to find somebody that isn't noticeably inconsistent.
Right. I think instead of taking the home run swing that they were with Jeff Sims, because I think they saw him and they're like, hey, if we can develop him a little bit, he can turn into a superstar. I think you take, hey, we're going to take the real solid base hit here in like a Will Howard or, whoever else, right?
Give me Will Rogers.
Will Howard, Will Rogers.
Give me that last name.
Just the Wills.
Give me it. Will Howard, too, was in that Heisman race the past 2 seasons, and he's been incredibly consistent.
He's been a super consistent guy.
I mean, second most passing yards in the SEC, and he's got a ton of playing experience. Yeah. That's what I'm talking about. Will Rogers.
Yeah.
Will Howard's got the Adrian Martinez connection.
Yeah,
so that's already like
rock
getting
solid.
rude.
And he's just a rock solid
Nebraska.
guy, right?
But if you want to make a splash, should I save it? I'll save it.
We'll save it for the next segment. A little bit of a tease here on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Wrapping up hour number one here on Hurrdat Sports Radio. You can give us a call at 888-638-4876. That's the Warhorse Sportsbook hotline. I want to tell you real quick about our friends at Warhorse. They are the best place in Nebraska to place your sports bets. You can go to the casino in Lincoln or to Horseman's Park here in Omaha at 6303 Q Street to place your bets. They can do almost every major sporting event, whether you're talking about pro, college. They do the fights. They got props. They got live bets. They got straight bets.
Oh, I know?
They got the parlays that burned Andrew this weekend. They've got everything. They've got you covered there at the Warhorse Sportsbook. Check out the Warhorse Sportsbook app, the Warhorse Casino app, or warhorsecasino.com/sportsbook for all the details and a full list of house rules. Warhorse Sportsbook, no bets, no glory. Yeah, so you killed it on your picks this week.
Sure did.
But you parlayed them in such a way that you won how much money?
I went over.
$0.
I went over. Yeah, no. Hopefully those were listening to the show on their, trek to their Thanksgiving gathering, maybe out of state.
Maybe they were hiding somewhere in a house listening to the podcast to avoid the family.
They had to, right? Maybe you were in a sports betting state and you could do it
mobily.
Yeah. Or no, I was actually going to say, Nebraska's a sports betting state.
It
Maybe
is.
you snuck out. You went out the back door.
Got over to Horseman's Park.
Went over to Horseman's Park, placed a quick bet, got back before anybody knew you were gone, and you rode Andrew's picks because they were on fire. You asked me for some Thursday props. I gave them out.
Yeah.
If individually bet, Ravi.
You won all the touchdown ones, right?
4, 5 of the 7 plays that I gave, all hit. And all the touchdown bets hit. So Montgomery touchdown, CeeDee Lamb touchdown, and McCaffrey 2 touchdowns. Then we had plays stored up for the weekend. We gave some college plays. We also had some NFL plays, which I don't think we got to. All 3 NFL plays hit, by the way. So sorry that you weren't able to place those. But the college plays.
Yeah.
All 3 college plays, man.
Yeah.
They hit. They hit on the nose.
You just had to parlay them.
Yeah.
I'll take it.
Yet I'm a greedy son of a gun. And I came away with nothing. But, that's okay. Because we live to fight another day. And I feel like that's the same boat Nebraska's in, man. You live to fight another day.
So you teased a quarterback coming in, a transfer portal quarterback. I think everybody agrees.
You make a splash?
We're looking at least one. I want 2. I want them to bring in 2. Kind of like they did a couple years ago. They brought in Chuba as more developmental guy. They brought in Casey Thompson as kind of an immediate starter guy. I think that's a method that can work. And I think that's what Nebraska needs to do here. You were talking about a quarterback that can make a splash. Who do you have in mind? Because Will Howard is kind of my safe pick, right? Been very solid. Obviously, Adrian can maybe peer recruit him to Nebraska a little bit. I know they played under different coaching staffs, but it seems like Adrian still has a good amount of love for Nebraska. Who's your splashy guy?
So the only reason I was paying attention to this guy was because of Carson Rauner. Shout out Elkhorn South.
Okay.
Matthew Sluka from Holy Cross.
Okay.
FCS quarterback.
That's a deep cut.
Now he's been, picking up steam now that other people have noticed his stats and his name has kind of bounced around with Notre Dame lately and things. But Notre Dame always plays it safe, so they're not going to.
They're probably not going to FCS, right?
Yeah, no shot. But I was following him over the course of this season, and let me read you off his career statistics. Okay. 5,800 yards, 59 touchdowns, just 15 interceptions. Okay. He's dual threat.
Okay. I like dual threats.
He's got 3,500 rushing yards and 38 touchdowns.
That's pretty good.
Okay. He's a hard yard guy. He's under the radar, but he's the perfect fit for Nebraska. Why? Because you don't have to change too much with him. You don't have to recreate the offense next year because of who you bring in. What was working for them this year, or at least what they like to do, is keep the ball on the ground, right?
Yeah.
Have a quarterback that's a little bit mobile, maybe run the option. Matthew Sluka allows you to get a little change mixed in, but also not veer away too much from what you already know.
Okay.
And that's why I think Nebraska could really splash with a guy like him. He's got the stats to back it up. He's got the experience to back it up, his playing experience, I mean. Will it translate to FBS? That's the $1 million question. But it's hard to say that a guy of this caliber couldn't be successful at a Nebraska.
Yeah.
Right?
So my only hesitation, just kind of looking over some of the stats real quick, is the completion percentage prior to this year. Didn't crack 60% until this year, his 3rd year as a starter, 4th year in the program. Just 62%. My concern would be raising a level that would drop back down into the 50s. That would be my concern. I think you want somebody, which other than that, and again, I haven't seen this guy play hardly at all, just a few highlights, right? So this is based purely on the statistics. I don't know if he had dozens of drops every year, which is entirely possible. You see that a lot sometimes at lower levels when you've got a guy that maybe can make some throws that guys aren't used to seeing. Sometimes you get some receivers that make drops. I think they probably want a guy that they're comfortable with completing at a decently high percentage. That would be my only hesitation on a guy like Matthew Sluka. And the other thing is, so for a guy like him, who you're talking about his last year of eligibility, that's a guy you probably walk into as like, that's going to be your starter.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, with a guy that is going from FCS to FBS, that's a little bit of a harder sell for me. I'm not saying it's out of the question. Maybe they get into this guy, they get into this guy's life, they like love his mindset, and then like if that's the deal, I'm okay with it. But I think there's an inherent risk, right? When you're, I mean, honestly, when you're talking about any transfer quarterback, but especially ones that haven't played at the FBS level, and I wouldn't rule it out. You know, we saw Cam Ward at Washington State be super effective. We've seen it before with, I believe his name was Vernon Davis. Nope, that was the tight end for the Vernon Carey, the quarterback for Oregon a few years back. I believe he's the one that replaced Mariota as an Eastern Washington transfer. So it's worked out. We've seen it work before. But I would be a little bit hesitant just because it's such an unknown, right? It's most of these other guys like Will Howard. I've seen Will Howard play a ton of football. Mm-hmm. Will Rogers. I've seen Will Rogers play a ton of football. Even like, I don't want this guy, but Spencer Petras. I've seen Spencer Petras play a ton of football. I'm good there. I can pass on Spencer Petras. But like a Max Johnson's interesting. He played at LSU, Texas A&M. He's got some experience at high major college football level. The guys that I'm interested in, honestly, though, I'm really curious about some of the younger guys they might go after. This isn't a younger guy, but Tyler Van Dyke from Miami just went in the transfer portal. He's was a highly talented, highly touted guy coming out of high school as well. But I'm interested in some of the guys that maybe haven't played a ton yet, that I think could be longer term answers for Nebraska. Not that they're going to start next year. I think you're probably going to have some sort of a stopgap type guy for next year. But I am really interested in to see who they think the long-term answer is at quarterback.
Well, so the completion percentage doesn't bother me.
Okay.
And I'll step in and say that first because it's been trending in the right direction.
Sure, which is good.
And so it would be hard for me to imagine that would take a major step back next season if everything's been trending upward. What really sticks out is his interception turnover totals have stayed
pretty low. Yeah.
Consistently
4,
low.
5, 6, somewhere in that range. Yeah.
I don't even think it's reached 6 before. I think he's only ever got it up to 5.
Yeah.
And this is somebody that if you're looking to make a splash, you go get because he's so under the radar. He's going to be overlooked because he is in his final year, because he is coming from FCS and he played at a school like Holy Cross and doesn't have maybe the compete level that, a Van Dyke has or a Howard has or a Rogers has or a Shaw has. This is somebody that kind of just fits what Nebraska's all about, right? Finding that diamond in a rough. And this is him. He embodies what Nebraska is outside of the fact that he's on his final year.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. If he had more years of eligibility,
2 years remaining,
it would be the ideal fit for Nebraska. But still, even though he's on his last year and that, Nebraska's all about, development, that's why it's okay to have a one-stop shop guy. Mm-hmm. Because what Nebraska's missing right now is a gamer. They need somebody that is just a complete difference maker. They didn't have that this year. They had guys that showed they could be that.
Sure.
Maybe like Jalen Lloyd when he made some splash plays, but he wasn't involved enough to be a literal gamer. Emmett Johnson showed some life, but he didn't get, he didn't compile at least the stats enough to be at least given the trophy of being a gamer. No quarterback was a gamer this year. No difference maker. Who was it last year? Trey Palmer.
Yeah.
Trey Palmer's a gamer. And that's what made Nebraska successful in the latter weeks. They need to find a gamer.
Coming up next, we've got Adam McClintock. We're going to talk some college football coaching changes here on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
I'm back where I belong. I'm back at a place where we considered home for 4 amazing years of this coaching journey. This is a special time to be the leader of this great football program. From the moment I came down here back in 2018, I've been blown away by this place. Okay, resourced as the premier football program in the country.
Kicking off hour number 2 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio. I'm Ravi Lulla. Andrew Rogers here with me. We're live on AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities as well. And we are brought to you by the NDOT Highway Safety Office. 1 of every 3 fatal crashes in Nebraska involves an impaired driver. Why take chances? If you drink or use other substances, do not drive. Impaired driving is deceptively dangerous. From the NDOT Highway Safety Office. Joining us now on the Warhorse Sportsbook Hotline is our friend Adam McClintock. He is the college football professor. He is a founder of Matrix Analytical. Adam, how are you this morning?
Pretty good, guys. How we doing?
What's up, man?
It is one of my favorite times of the year, as you know, not because the college football regular season is over, but because I'm a huge coaching carousel nerd. So I'm a little bit of like,
bless you.
Excuse me. I'm apparently
worst time to get a sneeze.
I
there,
know.
huh?
Mid question, apparently allergic to that one. No, this is one of my favorite times of year, Adam, and I know it's one of your busiest times of the year. So we appreciate you joining us. Let's start with a job that's not opening up, apparently, and that is the UCLA job. That was one of the strangest ways that like will they won't they has played out. The report gets out that, hey, they're firing after USC. They beat USC pretty handily, and they're like, well, I guess we'll keep him. So I get my question with Chip Kelly is, what do your numbers say about him as a coach? And do you think it was the right move for them to retain him?
Well, the numbers, Chip Kelly, it was kind of a strange year for him because he's got a new quarterback. He's breaking in a freshman quarterback, or he was attempting to, and he kind of had a rotation of quarterbacks going on all year long. And in an offense like Chip Kelly's, it's that's going to take a little time. Mm-hmm. What was encouraging about UCLA is they found a defensive coordinator for the first time in Chip Kelly's career that is very good. So from that aspect, it's kind of tough to know what to do. I think UCLA, if the guy who's currently in East Lansing now was still in Corvallis, then we may be having a different conversation. But Michigan State struck first, and now UCLA has kind of, I think, probably made the right decision and giving Chip another year.
Adam, you mentioned Jonathan Smith going from Oregon State to Michigan State. I think everybody agrees it's a home run for Michigan State, but I've heard some people say that maybe there was something better out there for Jonathan Smith, if not in this year's cycle, then in next year's. How do you view Michigan State as a job? Because I know that's part of your equation as well.
Yeah, Michigan State, I mean, it's a lot better job now that there's no divisions in the Big Ten.
Sure, yeah.
They were one of those in the East, along with Penn State, that they were kind of locked in that death circle of
yeah.
Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, and then you had Michigan State there, right? Well, that's not the case anymore. It's divisionless football in the Big Ten. Anytime you can get a Big Ten or SEC job, I think at this point you have to take it, because those two conferences are separating themselves so much from the rest of the college football landscape that the resources at those schools are just going to be better than what you can get in the ACC or Pac-12 or Big 12 moving forward.
Adam, just yesterday, I saw Feldman tweet out that Florida parted ways with their co-DC and defensive line coach. And then as I was, looking through things this morning, I also saw that you guys as well did a nice little kind of like Twitter feature on defensive coordinators. And, it had me thinking about that move that Florida made, because as I kept reading more and more about those two coaches, nationally, it seems like they're perceived as like highly regarded at their positions. But then it had me thinking like, okay, how do you go from being fired from a university and then also be looked at as like, hey, they won't be on the market for long? Like, where do you kind of like draw the line there? Because there's obviously different scenarios and situations that, can be delivered saying like, well, they're actually just a good coach and they just didn't make it work here. But like, how does Florida go from firing them and then these two also being looked at as like, hey, they won't be they won't be jobless for long?
Well, it's the human aspect of this that people kind of forget about. Is you have 11 headsets that have to get along and have to have the same vision, have to have pull in the same direction. Florida just hired a new defensive coordinator last year in Austin Armstrong, right? Who's to say that maybe his vision and the vision of his defensive line and secondary coaches weren't playing in the same direction? So then Billy Napier's in a position where, okay, does he fire his defensive coordinator he just hired, or does he allow his defensive coordinator maybe to make some changes on his side of the ball that he wants? I think that's maybe the situation you're getting into there at Florida more than anything. And, human element there again, some programs make mistakes, and this may have been a situation where that might not have been the best thing to do. Those are two very good coaches, and I kind of agree with the sentiment out there that they won't be on the market for very long.
Adam, I want to get to our the openings here, the current openings here in a second, but first I want to ask you about Mike Elko and that Texas A&M fit, because it seemed like they were settled on Mark Stoops. There was a little bit of a revolt, and then Mike Elko ended up being that guy. So a couple questions here. Number one, out of those two, who did you like better in terms of the numbers that you guys put together? And the second question is, how do you think Mike Elko is fit-wise at Texas A&M?
Well, first of all, remember when we talked last week, or was it maybe a couple weeks ago now? I don't know. It's all blending together. we said that Texas A&M was going to swing for the fences because that's who they think they are, and they did. They swung for Dabo Swinney and they missed, and then we said they were going to come back down to earth and have to hire a Mike Elko or a Jeff Traylor at UTSA. And that's exactly kind of what happened. They swung for the fences. Dabo, I think, probably maybe entertained it for a bit, but in the end, why leave Clemson when for something like Texas A&M? That's not you typically don't see that in the coaching profession. But I like Mike Elko. I think he's a much better fit there than Mark Stoops. If I was a Texas A&M fan and Mark Stoops was announced as the head coach, I probably would have been right there with the pitchfork as well. Because the next time Mark Stoops upsets somebody will be the first time. He beats the teams he's supposed to beat, and he very rarely swings above his weight class. You can't have that at Texas A&M because you're going to have to beat Alabama. You're expected to, or at least that fan base expects them to beat Alabama ever so often. Expects them to beat LSU. Expects them to compete with Georgia. Mark Stoops was never going to do that.
Adam,
he has. Go ahead. Mm-hmm.
No. Go ahead. Finish your thought.
So yeah, Mark Stoops. He's going to beat the teams that he's more talented than, but he's not going to do well against teams with equal talent or greater talent than he has on his roster.
Okay. I want to change directions here, and I had a follow-up thought there, but I think you kind of cleared it up for me. As we talk about like those big name guys like Dabo Swinney, you have another guy that like his name has been rumored, but it's kind of weird that his name has been rumored, and that's Ryan Day. Mm-hmm. Have you dived into him at all? Because at Ohio State, he's extremely successful, but because he can't get that big win against Michigan anymore, it seems like, Ryan Day's going to move on to so-called greener pastures.
Yeah, I don't completely get that. I understand, the importance of that game in the state of Ohio. We had that experience here in Nebraska years ago when Osborne was fighting to beat Oklahoma for the first time. It took him 4 or 5 years to do that. So completely get that. But you also have to, on the other hand, see that he doesn't lose. I mean, he beat Notre Dame this year. He routinely beats Penn State, which is a good program. I don't know if you can fire a guy just because he struggles with that one team, And quite frankly, there hasn't been very many teams the past 3 or 4 years that have beat that one team. So yeah, it's frustrating. I see on their end, but you could also do what some of these other programs do and throw the baby out with the bathwater and maybe get somebody in there that is going to do worse than what Ryan Day is doing.
Adam, we're talking with Adam McClintock, college football professor and from Matrix Analytical. Adam, speaking of Ryan Day, we were having this discussion yesterday about the Ohio State job, and we were trying to come up with how many guys would say no out of hand to Ohio State if it came open. And I think the list stopped at Saban and Kirby Smart. Is the list longer than that, or is that pretty much right? If Ohio State comes up, just about everybody's listening.
Yeah, I think just about everybody's listening to that job. I mean, that's the premier. I know Michigan has been on a run the last 2 or 3 years, but Ohio State, that's the premier job in the Big Ten, has been for the past decade. Just because the last 2 years or 3 years have went Michigan's way, I don't think that changes that. Their desire to win, they're an SEC mindset in the Big Ten. Their desire to put their resources towards football is unmatched in the Big Ten. So I think that if that job would come open, you would see there'd be the only two candidates that would not take that job. I think are the guys you guys mentioned. Kirby Smart of Georgia, and So that is the premier job of the Big Ten. I think that that line of candidates would be out the door for that job.
Adam, I regretfully missed the last interview that you had with Ravi on the show, and you guys talked a little bit about Tony White in the opening at San Diego State. But if I remember correctly, listening back, you felt that they weren't going defense. Did I get that right, Ravi? That he gave me the head nod, so I am right there. As you hear, just yesterday or a couple of days ago, Tony White interviews with San Diego State. Are you still feeling that way with that job?
I think so. From everything that we've heard and I've heard. I mean, they have to interview Tony White. He's an excellent coach. He's going to be a head coach someday. They'd be foolish not to do the due diligence and at least give him an interview. But from the feeling out there, they're having trouble getting people in the stadium, and I think there's been a real fan push that they would rather, see games that where they win 35-31 instead of 10-7, because that's kind of been the way it's been at San Diego State for years, ever since Rocky Long was there and ever since he left. So I think there's a big push for some exciting offense in San Diego State, and maybe that does, hiring somebody like Tony White doesn't mean that you won't have exciting offense there. You never know the plan for how those defensive minded head coaches are going to fill their staffs out. So we'll just see out there. But the feeling is they're leaning more towards the offensive head coach.
Before we jump to some of the open jobs currently, I believe last time we talked, you mentioned there was some jobs out there that were going to come open that hadn't yet, or that we hadn't heard about yet. As you kind of look at the list of what's open, are you expecting any more bombs to drop? And if it's like exclusive information, I don't need names or anything, but as you're kind of going through your work, are you looking at and say, hey, yeah, there might be still a couple more shoes to drop, or is it just the musical chairs now that'll open up as other people steal other people's coaches?
Well, I can't really get into names, but let's just put it this way. Typically, in a coaching carousel cycle, there's between 20 and 28 jobs that come open. There's only been 14 so far this year, so we're only about halfway there.
Okay. All right. I won't push you any further because I know this is your livelihood a little bit there. So
I'll push forward.
So of the jobs that are open, not a ton of Power 5 jobs open right now. I believe Houston, Indiana, Duke, Oregon State, Syracuse are the Power 4 or 5. I don't know, whatever the Power Conference jobs that are open right now. I don't know. It feels weird to include Houston in there, but I guess maybe it feels weird to include Oregon State in there too as well. But out of those jobs, those are all kind of in that, not the top tier of college football jobs. Do you think a job like Indiana, despite the lack of its history, despite kind of what they've been, because they are in the Big Ten, is first in line there? Or what's the pecking order of those jobs that's open?
Well, I think one of the jobs that's open right now, the most attractive should be Houston, right? You're right there in a very fertile, recruiting ground. And I know they're not funded like Indiana might be, but you're not going to. It's going to be really tough for you to mix it up with the big boys of the Big Ten at Indiana. With the reconfigured Big 12, if you would get the right coach in at Houston, I think that could really go somewhere quickly with their resources and with their recruiting base right there in the Houston area. I think that's a good looking job right now for the ones that are open.
Adam, what do you make of Fran Brown emerging as the top target at Syracuse?
Hey, it's another Matt Rule, defensive disciple, right? So he's done well as a defensive backs coach at Georgia. Excellent recruiter. Not only, and some of these position coaches you have to watch because they only do their best work when they're out of Georgia. That's not Fran Brown. He was good at Temple. He was good at Temple. He was good at Rutgers, and then he went to Georgia, and he's still good. So he's done it at every level of competition that he's been at. I think that would be an interesting hire for Syracuse.
Adam, I wanted to ask about some guys that you and I had talked about before that we're both big fans of. Curt Cignetti out at James Madison, who I think I know at least during a portion of the season was basically your highest rated coach in your metrics. And then Jamie Chadwell, a guy that I've been really high on for a while. Of those Power 5 jobs that are open, do you see an opportunity? I know Duke kind of makes sense geographically with both of those guys. I don't know if it as much makes sense from a fit standpoint. Do you see any of the open jobs, whether Power 5 or not, that look like, I could see one of those two guys slotting in, especially considering Cignetti's a little on the older side for, maybe some of those guys that want a young up-and-comer?
Yeah, and like you said, it kind of depends on what the athletic director is looking for at whatever school they're going to. But I think Cignetti would make a lot of sense at Duke. I think Chadwell would make a lot of sense at Duke. Especially, Chadwell has such a specialized offense. Maybe that might be the way to go with somewhere like Duke, where the entrance, requirements are a little more stiff than other places, and maybe kind of hard to get the same athletes in there. You put a system in like Jamie Chadwell runs at Liberty, and previously Coastal Carolina, and that might fit well at Duke. I would really, Chadwell would be good at a lot of places, but for the position still open, I think he would make a lot of sense at Duke.
Adam, how uneasy should a coach feel about going to Oregon State in the position that conference is in right now?
Man, that's a rough situation they have going. I mean, do they even have a schedule next year? I mean, I know that they've got a scheduling agreement maybe with the Mountain West. I think they talked about a few weeks ago. But what's beyond that? What is their situation? I think that would be a really, really, really tough situation for a coach to step in. So I think Trent Bray is out there interviewing for the job. I think he would be an excellent hire for Oregon State. He knows the program, is a very good defensive coordinator. So we'll see which way they go. But when you have a guy like that in house that wants to take the job and take on that challenge, I think you have to look pretty strongly at him.
Adam, we'll want to switch gears here with you for the last couple minutes. I know you guys over at Matrix Analytical do a lot of college football playoff projections as well. There's some scenarios that could play out that would make, I think, the committee's life kind of a nightmare. You're talking about situations where, Georgia loses and you're trying to pick a one-loss Georgia non-SEC champ over, an ACC undefeated Florida State team. There's some scenarios that get pretty hairy pretty quickly. How much do you guys look at those and the possible different types of scenarios. I imagine you run the numbers on them. I guess what's the likelihood you found that there's a squirrely situation that pops up?
Well, I mean, all it would take is Nick Saban getting that crew ready to go and beat Georgia in the SEC title game, and then it's Armageddon, right?
Or if Washington loses to Oregon, right, and you've got two awesome one-loss Pac-12 teams.
Yeah, I think that's going to happen. I think Oregon's coming, to burn the house down.
Yeah,
this week on Friday night. So I think we can maybe even bank that one. But yeah, you have a one-loss Oregon. Let's say you have a one-loss Oregon, a one-loss Washington, a one-loss Georgia, a one-loss Texas who beat Alabama,
a one-loss Bama who's an SEC champ.
Yeah, exactly. What do you do there?
Can you leave out Texas when they beat Alabama, right? Like, how does that work?
You can, especially since Texas has looked so good the last few weeks too. I mean, they might come in and really put it on Oklahoma State this weekend too. So
but then are you leaving out an SEC champ one-loss Alabama? Because that doesn't seem like it's going to happen.
No, that won't happen. Not with a win over Georgia, I wouldn't think. No, that gets really wild really quick. I mean, maybe they usher in the 12th.
Say, we're doing it early, guys. We're going 8 this year. Let's go.
But man, what a year for it! What a year it would have been if we would have had that in place this year. I mean, this is actually the perfect year for it.
I was going to say it's the best argument they can possibly make to move to 12 teams
Right.
next year is the way it's going to play out this year, right?
Exactly. It almost seems scripted, right?
Hey, I don't know. Let's not go there. Adam, we appreciate your time as always. I know you're busy this time of year. Anything we missed? We got about a minute left. Anything we missed that's a big thing in your world right now that we didn't touch on?
Not really, but other than just, like I said, there's only been 14 openings so far in FBS, level of football. There's typically between 20 and 28. So we got at least 6 or 7 more to go. It's just, who's it going to be? And is it going to be somebody substantial that really causes that next, domino to fall? So.
That is what we will keep our eyes open for, Adam. We appreciate it as always. We will talk to you again soon.
Thank you, guys.
Hey, thanks, Adam.
That's Adam McClintock. He's the college football professor, and he is a founder of Matrix Analytical. He's our go-to for all of the coaching carousel fun and nonsense that is college football this time of year. Coming up next, we will have more Hurrdat Sports Radio here on AM 590 ESPN Omaha and ESPN Tri-Cities.
We will be back. We will be back. will be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. Radio.
4th and goal for Michigan. Handoff. First quarter. JJ takes the snap on third.
He threw that one into double coverage. I don't know.
You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We're halfway through the show here on Hurrdat Sports Radio. I'm Ravi Lulla. Andrew Rogers with me as well.
What up?
We are on AM 590 ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities. We're live from the Hurrdat Sports Bar and Grill, the H&H Chevrolet stage. And we are brought to you by our friends at Pratt Dental in North Platte, Nebraska. Dr. Pratt is the first dentist in Nebraska that is certified in the BioClear method and modern smile design, which can correct many aesthetic dilemmas in a permanent and less invasive manner than traditional treatments such as crowns. BioClear method and modern smile design are less invasive. They take less time, less waiting, and require fewer important appointments, and you can get multiple restorations done in the same day. If you want to learn more, call Pratt Dental at 308-221-2800. I wanted to get to I call it a postmortem for lack of a better term. Nebraska's football season is dead, and now it's time to cut it open and see what's wrong with it, right? But not just what's wrong with it. I'm not just a negative Nancy out, as it were.
Because life was good for a while.
Life was good for a while. It's not like nothing went right for Nebraska this year. So let's start with the positive, okay?
I bet yours is the exact same as mine.
I think it's the same for everybody, but I want to start there anyway. What went right for Nebraska this year? Let's say it on 3. 1, 2, 3. The defense. Well, see, there we go. We got different ones.
It was defense.
So, I think you're right. You're fair on culture, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think that is
2 things.
Yeah, so 2 things went right. Look at that. We're halfway there.
And Shane said, what'd you say, Shane?
I said Omar Brown.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Omar hit Stick Brown. I thought Shane was going to say Coach Rule's Fu Manchu during the Iowa game.
I mean, that whole defensive backfield was solid.
So I'll start defense and then you can go into culture, because I think you're right as well. Culture is a big one. But the thing that went for me on the field the most right was the defense. And that's not, I don't think, a hot take, although I did seriously consider the offensive line because of how much better they were than we were expecting. But the defense was a genuinely very good unit. I think top 20 nationally in basically every category, as high as in the top, I believe they were still top 5 in rushing defense by the end of the year. I haven't looked up the updated statistics yet because I got sad after the Iowa game. I didn't want to look at anything. But the defense, top 20 in pretty much all major statistics nationally. This was a genuinely very good defense with the defensive coordinator that you're really excited about. You hope you can keep him for one more year. I think San Diego State is going to go offense. They're interviewing Ryan Grubb from Washington, who's been with Kalen DeBoer at a bunch of different stops. My guess is that's going to end up being the guy, is Ryan Grubb. So I'm not super worried about Tony White this year. I think he is not long for being a coordinator anymore. But you've got a great coordinator. You've got guys that have really emerged, both veterans and young guys that have emerged on that defense. You've got kind of already the mix of having young guys that are going to continue to develop and having veterans. That's kind of the perfect mix of what you want on a football team. And the defense sort of found it in year 1. And it seems like it'll continue throughout the next couple years as well. And it was really nice to have a unit on the football field that you could feel good about pretty much every single game. Outside of the Michigan game, obviously, which is an outlier. I kind of just tossed that one to the side because it's Michigan. And then the Colorado game where the dam broke about halfway through the third quarter. This defense was consistent and great all year long. I think you have to be happy at the very least with how the defense played.
And that has a lot to do with the foundation and the culture that was set right away when this new staff took over. And yes, there was culture before. Yes, there was, a foundation, even though there were some cracks in it. But it's all about stabilizing that. And that's exactly what this staff was able to do. And that early stabilization led to a 5-win season. And I think people constantly forget about that. But the reason this is the right for me is because that is so easy to build on going into the offseason. It's so hard to overlook the fact that the young guys on this team have already experienced game competition development, right? It's obvious. Player development is so obvious from what you saw this season. You got that with young guys, skill guys on offense. You got that with some young guys defensively. We brought up 2 names almost every week. Prince Willa Uman-Mielen and Cam Lenhart. 2 guys that, because they got game reps so early, they will be difference makers down the stretch. Why? Because they were a part of the concrete that was poured into the foundation, the ones that were sealing up the cracks. Then you had the veterans in the room that were also helping lead. And even though you had maybe a chart in front of you of who the seniors were, the juniors, the sophomores, the freshmen, etc., everybody was on the same playing field. And that is because of the culture that Coach Rule initiated when he got here.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And I think that culture feeds into defense more directly than it does to offense. I think defense, while the execution and the technical aspect are very important, so much of defense is effort. Do you want to do the hard thing? And that's football in general, but I feel like especially on defense, are you willing to do the hard thing? And if you have the culture in place, generally guys are willing to do that, and that's what you saw for Nebraska. The next one, so there's two more categories: what went wrong and then what killed them. So what went wrong for me, I think we're going to know what killed them, but what went wrong for me was the offense in general. Was the worst offense in Nebraska since 1968. They averaged just over 300 yards per game and right at 18 points per game this year. That's not going to get it done very often. And even with that, you're talking about the worst offense in 55 years, if my math is right here. That is a team that very easily could have won 7 or 8 games this year. So that, again, goes to the defense, goes to the culture that we were speaking about. But the offense's inability to find anything that consistently worked, the option worked for a couple of games, and it seemed like that could be a thing. And then you've got some deep passes that worked for a couple of games, and that seemed like it could be a thing. But they never really found a consistent identity on offense. And part of that has to do with injuries. Part of that has to do with the quarterbacks they chose to bring in. Part of it just has to do with development of young guys. But the fact is, for whatever reason, the offense could never find any level of consistency. And had they been able to do that, you probably are looking at a 7 or 8 win team pretty easily rather than a 5 and 7 win team. So I know that's an easy one, but for me, the offense's inability to do anything consistently really ended up being what was wrong.
Well, and I'm on the same page there because I had 2 things that fell into that category for me. It was injuries. They were hit with the injury bug early
and often,
and they had to figure out how to adjust. They were changing on the fly. And along with that, it's turnovers. Turning the football over was the biggest problem for this team. Now, I'm sure that could also fall into what killed them, and you may lead into that. I have like an alternate to that, which is why I have this into the what went wrong category. And the reason is, you can't expect to turn the football over 4 times in a game and expect to win. You just can't. You can't even get close in the turnover margin and still turn the ball over 3 times and expect to win games. And the fact of the matter is the turnovers weren't in the second quarter. They were costly turnovers. Ones that happened toward the end of a game where it was either, hey, we have a chance to win this by just getting some points, some easy points here, or it's, you tighten up because you're like, I'm too worried about turning the football over in this scenario, and things can, let's just say, curl up in the fetal position, and that's where Nebraska ended up being. So those 2 things were what went wrong for me and what killed them. Not having a gamer, man. I said that earlier. Not having somebody that you can put the football in their hands and they're going to win you the game. Now, I also think game management could go into this category too, and that was kind of my breakaway from turnovers, but I'll let you finish up.
Real quick, mine more than turnovers was the timing of the turnovers. Like you mentioned, 15 of their 31 turnovers came in the fourth quarter or overtime. That's basically half of their turnovers came in the most critical junctions of games. All right, that's the Nebraska postmortem. Coming up next, we're going to get some Hurrdat Hot Seat here on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Wrapping up hour number 2 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio. I'm Ravi Lulla. Andrew Rogers here with me. We are live from the H&H Chevrolet stage on AM 590 ESPN Omaha and ESPN Tri-Cities. And we are brought to you by our friends at Dingman's Collision Center. Dingman's has 4 great Omaha area locations, and they've been family-owned and operated in Omaha for over 25 years, including being voted first place Best of Omaha 18 years running. And that's for a couple reasons. It's because they invest in the latest technology to stay up to date so that they can work on Teslas, Fords, whatever you got. You got a Ford, I got a Jeep. They can work on whatever you want, whatever you need.
There was a Tesla in the parking lot when we pulled up.
There was a Tesla in the parking lot. Dingman's has you covered there. The second thing they invest in is their community, which is our community as well. With every car repaired, Dingman's gives back. You can find out more at dingmans.com.
Love my people at Dingman's. They've got me hooked up for January for a car repair, which is actually a great position for Dingman's to be in.
Yeah.
Because they are so flooded with service right now that if you want, your car fixed up in any way, you got to schedule it out. And make sure to get on their schedule now, because that's what I did when I was going through my insurance.
Yeah.
I had to get an estimate from them first before I could schedule. And I'm like, hey, I'm going to use you guys. Can I schedule ahead of time? And they're like, we just need like paperwork in order to make sure that can officially
everything
get done.
goes through. Yeah.
And so I'm like, shoot. So I like made sure to get in there right like the day after, and I got myself scheduled. They were open December like 27th. Okay. In less than a day, it was January 18th. Like, that's how backed up they are at Dingman's. A great problem to have, but it's because so many of you out there use them.
And it's because it's worth the wait.
It is worth the wait.
Are going to do the best job possible for you. So make sure you give our friends at Dingman's a visit, dingmans.com. Want to switch gears here? Give us a little, been very football heavy, very football-y today. We're going to switch gears here and go to our Hurrdat hot seat, where I'm only going to get a little less football-y, but because our conversation with Adam got my brain moving a little bit, and
always does.
I think we both kind of have an affinity. You mentioned Sluka, the quarterback from Holy Cross. I think we both kind of have an affinity for like under the radar guys, whether it's quarterbacks, coaches, prospects, whatever. And we talked to Adam about this a little bit, but I wanted to ask you, what current non-Power 5 coach would you be targeting if you were an athletic director with a job opening?
Whoa, that's heavy.
Because there's a few guys that have always been, and I can go first, so you have a minute to think about it, because it is a big one to kind of think about.
I have somebody on the brain right now, but I don't just I don't want to. I want to get
take. You can. Take,
I want the landscape, man.
You can take a second.
Yeah. Let me.
So my guy's easy because I've been obsessed with this guy for a hot minute, and that's Jamie Chadwell. I love Jamie Chadwell at Coastal Carolina. I love him now at Liberty. I was shocked that he didn't get a better job than the Liberty job last year. I thought he was going to get maybe looked at for that Georgia Tech job. I think Jamie Chadwell is one of the best coaches in college football. His offense is super innovative and interesting. It is a modernization of those triple option principles in terms of putting the defense in positions where they constantly have to make decisions. That's really hard for a defense to do and to get it right every time. He's super fun to watch, even though it is a pretty run heavy system, which a lot of people don't equate those things as being fun to watch, as some of those air it out. I love Jamie Chadwell. My wild card, not technically a outside the Power 5 anymore, but he was for a long time. I also really love Kalani Sitake from BYU. Love that dude. Always have. Love the way BYU plays football. They build from the lines out, and they just, I love the way they play football. So those are kind of my two guys. Sitake had a really nice run there for a while. They struggled a little bit in the last couple of years. But those are kind of my guys.
So I thought the easy answer would be Jeff Traylor, which is why I didn't bring him up.
Yep, good one.
Troy Calhoun's kind of my guy, but he's a little up there in
and he's pretty entrenched. He's been he's been there for 25 years. He's not going anywhere.
No. The other one is Willie Fritz, but he's also way up there in age.
Yeah,
he's in his early 60s.
I think he's 62, something like that. He's up there.
And I just don't see him like making a huge impact wherever he goes, at least for a long time. So I wanted to kind of sit more in the younger crowd.
Yeah, he's 63. Yeah.
I've always liked Jeff Monken.
I have too, from Army.
Yeah,
I know they've struggled lately, but
he's a winner.
They've honestly, to win at the degree that he did at Army is maybe one of the hardest things we've ever seen in college football to accomplish. He is.
He was very successful at Georgia Southern.
Yes.
Had a lot of 10-win seasons.
And he has been I really wish he would get a shot somewhere other than a service academy.
Right.
Because he's been adamant that he wouldn't run a strict triple option. And I'm just curious what it would look like. Because obviously the service academies are very different jobs. I'm curious what his offense would look like at a different school.
Now, an interesting name is John Summerall at Troy.
Okay.
Very, very interesting for the reason of I love what he does defensively. So that name intrigues me a little bit. But if I had to sit, I'd probably go with Monken.
Okay.
I'd just like to see Monken get his chance, get his shot. And if that time did come, he's just a guy you cheer for.
Yeah, absolutely. On the YouTube channel, somebody brought up Rhett Lashley as a guy that is early on in his career at SMU, but he is 17-8 in his first 2 years, including 10-2 this year. So Rhett Lashley, a good one. Sean Lewis, who was at Kent State, then went to Colorado to be the OC, got play calling duties stripped away. That was a very it's a very strange, very strange situation there. But Sean Lewis is a guy that Travis brings up.
John Summerall is interesting because he's young, and that's why I like him a lot too. But he's won immediately at Troy, and that's attractive.
Yeah.
Like last year, he went 12-2. He won a bowl game after starting the season like 3-4.
Yeah,
and then this year, what's Troy 10-2?
I'd have to look it up.
I think they have another 10-win season.
I think they're in that neighborhood.
I mean, this is a guy that won't be at Troy very long.
No, I can't imagine.
Especially because he is 44. No, he's 41.
Yeah, they were 10-2 this year. So
this is somebody that is going to be like, hey, Power 5 is going to come knocking a little earlier than normal.
I wonder if some of these, because I don't know how many of these non-Power 5 jobs are better jobs than Troy is. I wonder if like a Boise State, which has a commitment to football in a lot of ways that other Group of 5 schools don't necessarily. But, you look at like Syracuse, Houston, Duke, Oregon State. Oregon State's in a really tricky spot. You wonder if they would take a chance on a guy because of their sort of ambiguity.
But it's hard to leave even a Group of 5 school to say, hey, I'm going to Oregon State, which could easily become a
Group of 5
school. Right?
And it's a hard job, right? Location and things like that. It's a really challenging job. And so that's why, Oregon State's that's why I almost think like a Monken would make sense at an Oregon State, because
Washington it did the right thing by moving.
Yes,
right?
yeah.
Because you're keeping Kalen DeBoer secured.
Yes.
Same thing with Oregon. Like, I know Dan Lanning has been, connected to job this, job that, but I think he's stuck at Oregon right now.
For now, yeah. You'd have to have a really big job open for either of those guys to move on, I think, especially with them in the Big Ten.
But Oregon State and Washington State
They're
are
in
just
tough
in
spot.
like this weird funk of, yes, they have all this money.
Yeah.
But who are they sharing with? Right?
Yeah.
And how much money can you actually touch?
Yeah. At this point, I don't know that they can touch any of it. It's kind of pending litigation, right? So you're kind of in a limbo in that sense in terms of that Pac-12 money that's sort of just sitting in an account somewhere. But I think you look at a guy like Jake Dickert, who's I think a good football coach. Is he more likely to move on rather than wait and figure out? Honestly, I think that's why Jonathan Smith took a job that he probably could have gotten a better job next year. Maybe could have gotten a better job if he just waited it out to see, like Adam was saying, like there's probably 7 to 10 more jobs that are going to open up in the FBS, but he probably looked at it as an opportunity as like, hey, I got to get out of Oregon State. Like, this is just a tough spot to be in right now. Did you have one real quick? We have like 30 seconds.
We could.
We could save it. We'll save it. We'll save it.
Well, here, since we're talking about coaches,
yeah.
I'll ask you this. Who's one coach you'd jump off a bridge for?
Ooh.
If he or she told you to jump off a bridge, who's one coach you would just say, okay?
That's a tough one. Is it? I'm gonna exclude anybody that's currently coaching at Nebraska, but my gut was Kalen DeBoer. Just right off the top of my head, I thought DeBoer.
Really?
I love that dude. I think he's so good at what he does. Okay. What about you?
I don't know if I have one. I don't think I'd jump off a bridge.
That is Hurrdat Hot Seat. We may revisit a few more hot seat questions a little bit later. But coming up next, It's time for Mike Schaefer from Husker 24/7.
We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Kicking off hour number 3 here on Hurrdat Sports Radio. I'm Ravi Lulla. Andrew Rogers here as well.
What up?
We are on AM 590 ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, and KFOR in Lincoln. We are waiting on, or do we have Schaefer here, Shane?
He's here.
He's logging in now.
Logging in now. All right. We will have Schaefer here in just a second. You know, you asked that question about who I would jump off a bridge for, and the answer I wanted to give was going to come off as super cheesy, but I'll just give it now, is I wanted to say Matt Rule, because if he asked me to jump off a bridge, it was probably for my own good. Like something was chasing me I didn't see, or it was safe at the bottom and I didn't realize it. So that would have been my answer, because I genuinely think he has like best interest for people held out.
He's like, hey, it's actually deep. It's about 20 feet deep.
Yeah,
You're good.
You'll be okay. Yeah, just don't belly flop. You'll be fine. But we've got Mike Schaefer joining us now from Husker 24/7. Schaefer, what's going on, man?
Oh, not a lot. Just, continuing to not talk about last night's football game or last week's Sunday night football game, or just football in general. I'm due for a good bye week here. Nobody that I care about or have to cover is playing this weekend, and I'm going to just enjoy the fact that I am not tied or invested to any football game that could potentially end on a field goal after a bunch of no offense for hours at a time.
Schaefer, is Kevin O'Connell a coach that you jump off a bridge for?
Depends on the week. I mean, it's really, I feel like you get a really well-coached game. And then you show up and it's like, all right, they didn't throw the challenge flag on the Jordan Addison, what looked like a catch to me right away, right off the bat. And then you're really aggressive in the middle of the field most of the game, and it gets to, you just need one first down to effectively end this thing. 2 runs right into the line of scrimmage against the number 1 rush defense in the NFL over the last 6 weeks, and a backwards pass to Brandon Powell. It's, and then a 22-yard punt. It was great. Love watching football. Highly recommend watching football. Everybody do it. You always are happy when you watch football.
I mean, Schaefer, though, okay, we're talking 22-yard punts. We've got 4 turnovers from the quarterback. You probably felt right at home like you're watching a Husker game.
Yeah, it's been like this for the last year, more or less. Just a lot of let's see, the Vikings have 6 one-score losses in their 6 games this year.
Sounds about right.
That
Perfect.
sounds familiar.
Yeah. That's yeah.
So Dobbs mania is over. Is that safe to?
I don't know. So it's definitely not the fever pitch that it was when he had to come back against the Falcons and then the big start against the Saints. I still think that there's ways that you can utilize him, but there's a very obvious reason why he wasn't a highly regarded quarterback and has bounced around from several teams. But it's also one of those things where if they have Justin Jefferson the last 2 weeks, you maybe don't lose by 1 point and 2 points. So it's really, it's hard to say. Like, give him the full complement of weapons. Maybe he's a little bit better. But yeah, he's a turnover-prone quarterback that can be exciting and can be infuriating. And it certainly. I joked the other day that if he could just give his legs and his eyebrows to Kirk Cousins and we could just roll with that, that'd be a pretty unstoppable quarterback.
Hey, Schaefer, well, speaking of quarterbacks, this is a great transition into something we were talking about earlier on in the show, development or portal, because that's the question this coaching staff is going to have to answer. Because the easy answer would be development, knowing what we know about this staff, right? Because of what they preach. But the problem with that is, fans heard great things about Harburg and Purdy in the spring, and then they preached that development. You saw that development, but then, we got a little sense of what they offered in the fall, and no one was satisfied with that. So is it necessary to make a splash in the portal for the Huskers to get to where they want to be?
Well, I definitely think they have to find at least one quarterback in the portal. The interesting question is, can you use the portal to find a quarterback to develop that you want, that, fits what you ultimately would like to do? And the thing is, there's going to be a lot of freshmen, sophomores available in the portal, but they could be guys that don't have a lot of playing reps. How comfortable are you reevaluating their high school film, going off a practice film they might have or spring game film, and utilizing that? Or does Nebraska need to take 2 quarterbacks? And one of them is a veteran that could step in right away, but maybe spent last year at a group of 5 or an FCS and is looking for an opportunity to move up and isn't someone that can't be unseated, but maybe just gets the job to start with because he's steady. And then your younger guy could come through and take the job, or Chubba could take the job, or Heinrich, or whomever. There's lots of different ways that this can go. And a lot of, I think this week is just going to be keeping an eye on who goes into the portal and then what sort of fit that would be for Nebraska. When you sort of look at it, I mean, I look at a guy, the Michigan State quarterback that just went in. If Nebraska had that version of a quarterback for 6 games this year, they probably go 2-4 in those 6 games, or, if you use the 5 games that they've lost, they maybe go 2-3 in those. And we're talking about a 7-5 team that's bowling. Is it Caitlin Hauser, or
Hauser?
How exactly it's
Well, they also lost Leave it.
Did he go in too?
He went in too, which makes Michigan State's whole thing even more interesting because they just got a new head coach in Jonathan Smith. So are these two guys just like, hey, I guess I'm screwed, or is it, hey, I don't want to play for you?
It could be a combination of, hey, I don't want to be in East Lansing anymore. Hey, I don't want to play for you. Hey, this isn't a program I signed up for. Or, hey, I just need a fresh start. It could be all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
The point I'm trying to make is that we watched Deacon Hill take Iowa to a 10-2 record without having to play a whole lot of good quarterback in that stretch. But you have to be competent. And Nebraska certainly had some competency issues. The biggest thing is, can they build a team where the quarterback doesn't have to be the focal point? That has not been the case for Nebraska football for how long? Like, they've desperately needed the quarterback to be the sun in this program every single year. And we don't have to see teams built like that to have success in college football right now. Matt Rule hasn't built teams where it's all about the quarterback. So the other part of it, can you find a guy who can, lift you up, but doesn't have to be everything, and you can put enough talent around him? Do they have enough offensive talent for whoever it is to be the quarterback to also be successful? I mean, these are fairly elementary questions, but they're ones that I think are kind of hard to answer. Right now, it'd be hard for Matt Rule to look people in the face and say, yeah, we've got enough offensive talent for you to thrive without having to be a star. And that's a big thing. I mean, they've got some interesting freshmen, but you can't sit here and tell me, if you're a quarterback and you're looking at the running back room and you're like, yeah, I'm excited about this. Or you're looking at the wide receiver room, you're like, okay, well, this guy has a bunch of long touchdown catches, but he has 9 catches overall. Here's another freshman with like 6 catches. Here's one with 2. Here's Alex Bullock, with 12 catches. Like, there's not a lot of returning production for a quarterback to look at and be like, okay, this thing is built to be super successful. It just needs me here. So there's going to have to be a heck of a sales pitch. I'm fascinated the type of quarterback, the background that quarterback has, how many of them. But the offense isn't just going to be fixed simply because they get a quarterback either. Like, there's some other issues that have to be figured out too.
Schaefer, amongst those other issues, I think, you'd probably like to get a little bit more production in the door from the wide receiver room, I'd imagine, even if you like the young guys and what they showed this year. I imagine the running back spot is another place where you'd like to see that as well. Without a running back in the class now, with the decommitment of Lacey a little while back, is there some guys that they're looking at that you're aware of in this 2024 class, or do you think they go portal to try and find help at those skill spots?
I think they have a lot of options that they can go with. Obviously, I believe it was Devin Riley that was just in this weekend, Boise State commit. Nebraska did not offer him, and I don't get the sense that they're going to offer him. There's a bit of a stalemate. They mentioned that he could come back for an official visit. I don't think he's going to come back for an official visit if he doesn't have an offer. He really did like Nebraska, but he didn't get to meet with Matt Rule. So it's hard to say that he's a priority. It felt more like a cursory glance, bring a kid in, unofficial visit, and see what you sort of think from a body size perspective, but you're not committed to anything that way. There's a guy who just decommitted from Utah, and Lamar Radcliffe, running back out of California as well. Could be one that Nebraska tries to bring in for a visit. There's a kid down in Hutchinson Community College where they're also recruiting a wide receiver, a special teams kind of ace, and Trey Richardson. His teammate Tyrell Reed also played prep ball in the state of Kansas. He is the leading rusher for Hutchinson. They're the number 1 seed, the NJCC and they're is it double A? NJC double A.
Yeah, you got it.
Whatever. It's 9 a.m. I deserve some grace here, folks. So there's options for them that are around. I don't know that there's anything that's going to be like, oh, you missed out on a guy that people felt could be maybe your number 1 running back very early in his career in Kawan Lacey. I don't know that there's going to be a 1-for-1 pickup there. I would like to see them go into the portal and get someone who fits sort of a power component for your running back room, because, if you want that body blow thing to be real, you needed more than probably just Gabe Irvin. You're hoping that he would stay healthy. I don't think you can bank on Gabe Irvin. I don't think you can bank on Ramir Johnson. I think Emmett Johnson is a nice complementary piece, but he needs something to go with him. And I think they have to go find that in the portal. And the nice thing is with what they need at running back and wide receiver, I don't think they have to, if you can get a star, great. If you can fall into the next Kenneth Walker, fantastic. If you can get Samari Toure, hats off to you. I think they need complementary pieces that can help their offense, but they don't have to go get like someone that has to have the ball 200 times. Like they need some extra depth because they do believe in these young players. They're going to give them opportunities. So I don't think that it has to be you have to go get a star. That's the nice thing about where they're at roster-wise. But it also kind of has to work. So you need to be judicious and make sure you get as good of a player as you can, with acknowledging that it doesn't have to be like a superstar. And they're more than likely wouldn't get one. I mean, it's hard, we talk about how much money 1890 and everything that they have. I mean, Nebraska hasn't exactly gone in the portal outside of Trey Palmer, which was a unique circumstance, and Samari Toure, which was before NIL, and blown anybody away with who they pulled out. I mean, their best portal addition is Jamari Butler, who is on their roster and they just prevented from leaving. I mean, legitimately, that was their best portal addition for the 2023 season. Ben Scott. I mean, those are your 2. Sure. Those are your 1-2.
And Schaefer, I'm happy you brought up Ben Scott, because I was thinking about the offensive line here, because I hear what you're saying. I hear what you're saying about a quarterback, and, they can't just come in and think like, oh my gosh, I'm the missing piece, or, just the same with the running back. Like, it's hard to kind of appeal to guys like that. But, when you look at the offensive line and you see the upgrade that they made from last year to this year, and, we know that, but how do you present that to guys either in the portal or even recruits, and saying like, hey, look, the O-line, they're on the up and up, and you'll be protected here. You'll have big runs here. Do they have to just hear that from the coaches, or can they see that themselves, do you think? I'm trying to wrap my head around that.
I think the easiest way is you take the overall stats from 2022 and then you just push them up against 2023. I think sacks are way down, and I would anticipate that your running numbers look a lot better. And so those 2 things alone, and then you can be like, we're going to have 4 out of 5 starters return, plus guys that have, experience. I think you can utilize the offensive line as a selling point by just doing the raw numbers. And if people want to go in and watch the games themselves and see what would be in front of them, then they're going to do that. But I don't know that you have to, at least surface level, I don't know that you have to do a lot of window dressing, because they're clearly better than they were last year. It'll also be a veteran offensive line that you return to. I would stop well short of saying that they're good. But compared to what they were last year, it's hard to not say that they aren't very improved. And at least as you look at the offense, the most complete part of the offense that they have right now. I mean, they probably know who their starting 5 is most likely to be if they're healthy at this point. You can't really say that about any other position on offense, save for tight end. And they were their own sort of disappointment in 2023.
Schaefer, going back to the recruiting class a little bit here. I know we had talked a lot about Carlon Jones and the attention he's been getting from other schools. I know, Carter Nelson had the Notre Dame visit and things like that. Is there any guys in this class that you're looking at as yeah, I'm not sure they're going to end up actually signing with Nebraska. Like, who would those guys be at this point?
The two big ones, Ja'Cory Barney, the wide receiver that committed to Nebraska in July, committed to Nebraska over Miami, and then Arizona has been really involved there, and I think that's something to watch. But he's got a really good relationship with Garrett McGuire, and also his mom wants him to go to Nebraska. And generally in recruiting, moms tend to have a lot of say in what happens. And so the fact that she feels as strong as she does about Nebraska, about her son leaving Miami and going somewhere and just sort of getting out and seeing, what else is out there. And I think that will help. Now, this is a big week. Coaches can go on a road starting Wednesday, I believe. I've got to double check on that, but I think it's Wednesday. And so you're going to get the opportunity to stop by multiple times the Barney household or, the school, and just continue to reaffirm what should already be known to him, which is he's an early enrollee, I believe. He can get here early. He can go practice right away, and he can put himself in position where he and Jaden Doss and Jalen Lloyd, if you want to use them there, can all play a little bit of slot wide receiver. I mean, Ja'Cory Barney played quarterback, running back, wide receiver. I believe he returned punts and kicks. Like, he is the sort of athlete that Nebraska needs to prioritize, even though they already have committed. Like, they need to make sure that kid signs. So he's one of them. Carlin Jones is another. I'm more so than Ohio State. I am fascinated if Mike Elko at Texas A&M will offer some of these Nebraska commits that are in Texas that are nearby. Guys like Gibson Pyle, Carlin Jones come to mind. Those are probably the top two. One's in Houston, one's in nearby Houston. And Carlin Jones has already been to an A&M game this year. He's good friends with the running back that committed last year, whose name is escaping me, but he went to Texas A&M. They trained together. I feel okay about Carlin Jones right now. That's one I'm going to check on today. Hope to have more information at Husker 24/7 on that. But for right now, I think okay is sort of how I feel. But I'm definitely watching what Texas A&M does in the early days of Mike Elko, because it would make a lot of sense for them to look at, okay, these guys are leaving the state. We need to keep some positions here. They, go hard in state right away first year. Carlin Jones makes a ton of sense.
Schaefer, you mentioned some guys that can possibly be early enrollees in potential targets. Who are some of the guys in this class that you're most interested in that could be early enrollees that are already committed to Nebraska?
Yeah, so we know Kalen's going to be there in the spring. He'll be part of the quarterback mix. I don't think he'll actually be challenging as a true freshman, but he'll be in that mix. So that alone is sort of always interesting to see. Carlin Jones could be an early enrollee, but in this case, his mom wants to see him walk across the stage with his graduation class. I think it's one of those situations where he'd be one of the few people in his family to have done that. And so that's kind of one of those emotional things. On top of it, he's really good at track. And so there's a chance that he might stick around. But he would have the credits. He would need to file something, I think, by the 1st of December. So we're coming up on it for Carlin Jones. And then from there, the wide receiver situation for Nebraska, I mean, it's Ja'Cory Barney. I think some of these tight ends are coming in early. I believe Ian Flint might be an early guy as well. So we'll have to kind of keep an eye on it, but Ja'Cory Barney would be the really big one, I think, if that all plays out how it's expected.
Schaefer, Grant Bricks, the latest on him, because we see a ton, shuffling through the recruiting mix with his name and his connection to Nebraska, but it's still yet to the links are yet to be attached. How can that get done?
Well, here's how it can get done. He can just publicly make his decision. I mean, that's basically where we're at. Like,
is it just so that's where you really believe it? There's nothing else Nebraska can do.
If you're following the tea leaves right now, after an Oklahoma coach shows up to watch him play in a playoff game, he appears at a Nebraska football game. And then a couple of weeks later, he goes to an Oklahoma game. And then he was set to go to Kansas State, Iowa State on Saturday. And instead cancels that visit and is at Nebraska, Iowa for Black Friday. I mean, it feels like this thing is going heavily in one direction. I'll take you back to the comments that Matt Rule made that he had a player who wanted to join the program after the Wisconsin game. We haven't seen a public commit yet. I mean, I'm not saying for sure that's Grant Brix, but it sure feels like Nebraska's in a really strong position right here with someone that they've recruited really hard. And the entire time, Nebraska made more sense than the other places simply because he didn't strike me as someone who was going to go far from home. And Nebraska's proximity from his front door is about 88 minutes. So I would be shocked at this point if it's not Grant Brix for Nebraska. And I think we're going to hear something relatively soon. I mean, sometime within the next week.
You mentioned that 88-minute commute to his hometown from Nebraska. Are they going to give him the semi as part of his NIL deal?
I had not asked that, but that is you'd have to talk with Selden Trucking. I think Monty Selden is the one who handles that and has for years. I don't know that he's in a position to just give away semis.
Mm-hmm.
But if he is, and the NCAA allows it, or if it's an NIL type gift,
that's what I mean.
And what we have is Grant Brix is actually a semi truck driver apprentice, and so when he's not learning the art form of being an offensive lineman, he's out there driving the truck and making sure stuff gets where it needs to be on schedule. We rely on our truck drivers here in America. And so we might be relying on Grant Brix pretty soon.
Maybe he's going to be an intern with the equipment truck people, and he can, kind of work it in that way. It's a kind of a student work, kind of one of those deals like the rest of us had to do that weren't on Division I scholarships.
He'll have a full ride.
Or
he doesn't.
He might need to get that. Call Sapp Brothers up, get him a gas card for that semi as well, because that might be where it really gets him.
I think there'd be a little bit of a fight if Grant Brix just came out and said not only is he open to being recruited for football, but he's open to be recruited by a trucking company to run the business. I mean, you might get everyone kind of flying in on that one.
Werner's knocking down their doors.
Yeah. Here come the Hill brothers.
Everybody.
Hey, Schaefer, quickly here. You mentioned an 88-minute commute. Try a 4.5-hour commute. There is a quarterback in Algona, Iowa, that is still connected with Nebraska. The latest on Alex Mansky.
Yeah, I talked with him probably about 10 days or so ago, and he loves Nebraska. I mean, he just has such a strong feeling towards this coaching staff. I feel good about where they're at with him. He did say, in our interview, he was hoping Nebraska would make a bowl game because one of the things he hasn't been able to experience yet on all of his visits, he wants to just go see a practice. He's been to a game day. He's been to recruiting events. He's been to a training or Nebraska's football camp, but he wants to go to a practice because he wants to see what it's like. He wants to see what Marcus Satterfield is like, coaching, and what Matt Rule does during this. And he wants to see what a normal day would have been like for a football player. And so, that's kind of where it's at with him. And he won't have that opportunity until the spring. But I think he'll be committed somewhere before then, and it could be Nebraska. Sorry, Shane.
Mike J. Schaefer from Husker 24/7. We appreciate people that recognize the out music. We will talk to you again next week, buddy.
All right, guys. Have a good one.
See you, Schaefer.
That's Mike J. Schaefer, Husker 24/7 Sports. Coming up next, do a little bit more Hurrdat Hot Seat here on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We will be back. We will be back. will be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
Welcome back to Hurrdat Sports Radio. I'm Ravi Lulla. Andrew Rogers here with me. We are live on AM 590 ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, and KFOR in Lincoln. We are returning to the Hurrdat hot seat since we, as always, got about one question in the last time we went up. I went first last time. Andrew, you take it away.
All right. Hey, college basketball question.
Ooh,
I know I
okay.
had to break it up a little bit.
Yeah.
What is your favorite
Okay.
college basketball memory of all time?
Ooh. So this one is, I mean, I could split this up into a couple different divisions. I could do like a Creighton and a non-Creighton division. For Creighton, there's really two moments that stick out. It's Doug McDermott getting 3,000 points on senior night, which was incredible. The other one is Creighton clinching the Big East title on the last day of the regular season against Seton Hall in 2020, which was also incredible. Those are by far my favorite Creighton moments in terms of stuff that I haven't like worked.
Sure.
In non-Creighton, my favorite college basketball moment is probably, this is weird, but I am kind of obsessed with the ending of the 2016 national championship game with North Carolina and Villanova, where Marcus Page double clutches the three to tie it. Villanova comes back with Archie Diacono to Chris Jenkins. for the 3 to win it at the buzzer. There's just something about a buzzer beater to win a national title that is, it just sticks out with me pretty aggressively. That's probably, if we're talking about like one single memory, it's probably that sequence of plays that's way up there.
By the way, that when McDermott scored those 3,000 points, that game right there had Super Bowl like post game. I mean, that post game was the longest extended post game of all time.
Did you have to cut it up?
I had to cut it up.
Was it fun?
Yeah, it was okay. But I mean, it was just that sort of feeling to it. I mean, that's the thing I remember from being behind the scenes there.
My favorite college basketball memory of all time, and I'll do a one and the other just like you did, because I called a game for Lindenwood when I was a junior, and we were on the road, which seemed like forever. And let's just say Lindenwood didn't go to the most glamorous cities in America.
Sure.
We ended up in the Emporia, Kansases of the world.
Oh, yeah.
The Missouri Westerns, which is right down the road. Yep. Missouri Southern, places like that. And I remember I was also like helping pay through college because I would officiate, which I told you during a break. I have 19 games.
That's too many games.
Which is insane.
That's too many games, sir.
Yeah, it's what you do whenever you're in need of a little bit of bread. But I was calling this game, and it was a buzzer beater 3, like you're talking about. A guy named Jackson Price. Dribbling down. There's about 7 seconds to go. Well, first, it was a tie. The opponent from Missouri Southern hit a 3 to tie it. So Jackson Price gets the inbounds pass. He dribbles down himself, okay? Not a point guard on the team. He's the shooting guard of this team, but makes his way down the court himself. And I'm calling this game, and I'll just reiterate what I said. The inbound pass finds Price. He crosses half court with 8 seconds remaining. He pulls up for 3. And then I just go, Jackson Price! He made it! He made it! I'm one of 8 people in this gym. Okay. No one attended this basketball game. And I'm like standing up. Oh, shoot. Did I unplug something?
You did unplug. You unplugged both of us, I think.
Can you hear us still, Shane?
Oh, I think we're back. Okay.
I can hear you.
Yeah,
Okay.
Shane or Andrew.
I got too excited.
Yeah, much like you did while calling this play.
And I'm like holding my hands in the air like a 3, like a field goal's good. Okay. And I'm like, he made it. Jackson Price. What a clutch 3 by the guy wearing the jersey number 3. No one's next to me at this time. But I'm like looking all around. I turn around and there's like 4 Missouri Southern fans. And I'm like, did you just see that? They're like, how could we miss it?
Yeah,
we're the only ones in here.
We're right here, man.
So Missouri Southern calls timeout.
Yeah.
And I'm still rambling on about this call, and my voice carries, right? So it's carrying across this gym. I remember talking to our head coach after the game, and he goes, couldn't get a word in. All the guys were doing were listening to you. I'm trying to draw up a defensive play. And the only thing they're hearing is Jackson Price from the right corner. Yeah, so pretty excited. That was probably my best memory. But if I was watching one, it was watching Jimmer Fredette in the NCAA.
Oh, yeah. Jimmer was great.
So just his highlights throughout that tournament were outstanding. Okay, I'm done.
Yeah, if I was doing a longer stretch, instead of just one game, where I became obsessed with Steph Curry was his run with Davidson in the NCAA tournament to the Elite Eight. That was one of my favorite kind of extended experiences with college basketball. But that's funny. I half expected that story to end with and then Missouri Southern drew up a play and got the game winner, and I felt like an idiot just sitting there quietly, be like, and Missouri Southern wins the game.
No, but I did get to go home and ref. I didn't have to call somebody and like cancel. So like that felt good too. I got to go home and do my laundry.
Yeah.
Got the ref. Got to call a game winner. It was fantastic. I probably have the call on my website somewhere. I should see about pulling that up.
That's really funny. So this kind of goes into what you were talking about there a little bit, having done some play-by-play. Obviously, you do some reffing as well. You've done some coaching. My question to you is, what is your dream sports job other than the one you currently have?
doing play-by-play for college basketball.
College basketball play,
not just
like high
not
level,
just a team.
Yeah, like a national,
like national CBS broadcast that
like
you're
calling
going,
NCAA tournament
you're
games.
calling NCAA tournament games.
Yeah.
Like that was always a dream of mine.
Sure.
To be able to do that. That and calling like St. Louis Cardinal baseball games.
Yeah. That's because I kind of thought your answer might be Cardinals play-by-play guy.
Right. And that is still like an
sure.
amazing dream. But what people don't realize with that is like, yes, it's great, but with other interests I have in my life, like being an active dad and coaching my kids someday and things like that, you can't really do that when you're a play-by-play broadcaster for a baseball team. And Joe Buck talks about that all the time. He's like, when Dan McLaughlin got canned from the Cardinals and they were looking around for another broadcaster, they ended up with Chip Carey, who, grandson of Harry Carey. But they called Joe Buck first because he's a St. Louisan.
Yeah.
And Joe was like, no. And he's like, because he knows that with his other commitments, not just in the job, but within
his life,
he's like, I won't be able to spend any time with my kids. I'll actually be calling off from doing games. And like the first season, yes, maybe I get 162 games in, but then the next season, it may be 120. And then the next season, it may be 70.
Yeah.
And then, in his fifth season, he'll be doing one game. And it's like, well, you can't have a broadcaster that's just doing one game.
Yeah.
So that's why he likes doing Monday Night Football,
right?
Because it's once a week.
Once a week. You can be at home the rest of the week. You can do your prep at home. That's the tough thing with baseball is it's every day, right? Basketball, even college basketball, it's a couple times a week. Maybe you're going around the country a little bit, but at least it's a shorter season, right? Than a baseball season, which is most of the year, and you're doing it every single day. You don't get to be at home a ton. So
and it's inconsistent as far as sometimes it could be at night, sometimes it could be a day game, sometimes on Sunday it could be a day game, but it could be Sunday night, so you can't really set a schedule. And you got to play upon weather too.
So that's why I think college basketball would be great because yes, the season is a little bit longer than, most other sports, but it's not like overly long where it becomes like, oh, I am dreading calling this game at this day, at this hour. Like, no, college basketball is from November
to March. Yeah.
And then you can do whatever else you want throughout the year, but at least it's only a 6-month season.
Yeah. I mean, you could be like our guy, Nick Baugh, be the play-by-play version.
I don't know, though. Baseball gets the holidays off, though.
Well, kind of, because like,
I was even thinking about that.
I mean,
the other day,
you may get Thanksgiving and like Christmas off.
That's what I mean. But whereas, what other sport gets those off? None.
Yeah, but how many college basketball games at the national stage, if I got there, are actually playing on Christmas?
Not that many. I know Creighton played on Christmas last year, but for the most part, you're not talking about a huge number of games on the major holidays.
And
Thanksgiving, yes. You'd probably miss Thanksgiving because of the exemption tournaments. Thanksgiving's no Christmas, that's for sure. All right, coming up next, we're going to switch gears and talk to Aaron McMann. He covers Michigan football for M Live. Michigan heading to the Big Ten championship game, and they're hoping to the college football playoff as well. We will talk to Aaron coming up next on Hurrdat Sports Radio.
We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. We will be back. You're listening to Hurrdat Sports Radio.
4th and goal for Michigan. Handoff. Corum dives. End zone. Touchdown. Wolverines. And Michigan takes a 6-0 lead in the first quarter. JJ takes the snap on 3rd and 10. Back to pass. Looking. Fires down the middle. And it's caught. Roman Wilson inside the 5 to the end zone. Touchdown. Wolverines. Wow. Did JJ thread the needle there?
Wrapping up the show here on a Tuesday on Hurrdat Sports Radio. I'm Ravi Lulla, Andrew Rogers here with me. We're on AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities, and KFOR in Lincoln. We are joined now by Aaron McMann. He covers Michigan football for the Ann Arbor News and M Live. Aaron, how are you this morning?
It's good to be talking football with you guys.
What's up, man?
Aaron, we appreciate you joining us. Let's jump right in to football. Obviously, you get the big win over Ohio State for the 3rd year in a row. I guess, what's the general vibe around Michigan heading into this Big Ten championship game that most people are just automatically chalking up as a W? You're getting Jim Harbaugh back on the sidelines, and you're coming off of your 3rd straight win over Ohio State. I mean, people have to be feeling pretty good in Ann Arbor.
Yeah, I mean, the fan base is amped up right now. I think they realize this is Michigan's probably best shot to win the national championship. They've been in the playoffs the last couple of years, but they haven't been able to get over that hump. And I think the fans kind of realize that, given the way that Michigan's playing this year, despite Jim Harbaugh not being on the sideline for 6 games, and despite all the off-the-field drama and accusations and investigations, that I think this is their year for to win it all. Parity in college football has probably never been better. I think the opportunity is there, and I think right now they realize it's within their grasp.
Aaron, I'm curious. You mentioned Jim Harbaugh obviously missing half of the regular season with suspensions. How much of a difference, since he was able to be at practice and just not at the games, how much did those suspensions actually impact Michigan on the football field?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I don't know if it's necessarily quantifiable, but I can tell you, you're right. Him being there during the week for practice, I think does make a difference. I don't think they necessarily changed the game plan because he wasn't on the sideline. He still had influence. He still kind of dictated what things were going to take place, and maybe in-game adjustments maybe weren't there, especially those first 3 games in the non-conference schedule. But I think, and you saw it, Michigan's acting head coach, offensive coordinator Sherrone Moore, during that passionate post-game speech against Penn State, where he was dropping F-bombs and everything else, that they were playing for Jim, and I think they played in the way Jim wanted them to play. And then I think that was the case again on Saturday. They tried to emulate this smash mouth style of football where they're able to run it and take time off the clock and win in that physical style of football, and they did it again against Ohio State, and I think that's very much what Jim Harbaugh wanted to see.
Aaron, Michigan overcame everything that's hit them this year, and despite what anyone will say, they will be in the college football playoff. It is a very low likelihood that Iowa upsets Michigan this weekend. So, as you said, you think this is title year for Michigan. If they were to win the title this year, will it be primarily because of the leap McCarthy has made as signal caller this season, or would you attribute it somewhere else?
No, I think that's exactly it. Before the season even started, I said that Michigan's success this year would hinge on J.J. McCarthy and his arm. He's a former 5-star quarterback, highly touted out of high school. And he's one Michigan's kind of brought along the last couple of years. Even in 2021, when Michigan played Iowa in the Big Ten championship game, Hayden McNamara was a starting quarterback during that game, but they were still working J.J. McCarthy in. They were designing packages for him, kind of getting his feet wet. And then the change happened last year, and McCarthy got the ball. He was given the opportunity and obviously made the most of it. But I think this year, just his maturity, his ability to kind of compartmentalize things and kind of grow as a thrower, as a passer, I think has been the difference. Michigan's offense last year was largely predicated on the ground. Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards were getting a ton of carries. Corum was in the race for the Heisman Trophy, and that's not necessarily the case this year. Michigan's largely used the pass to kind of set up the run, whereas last year was largely the run to set up the pass. So McCarthy's, I think, been the difference maker. His numbers have been great. He's been very efficient. And while maybe he hasn't put up the passing stats that maybe a Jane Daniels or Bo Nix has, he's completing passes at like a 75% clip. His quarterback rate is pushing 200. So what he's being asked to do, he's succeeding in, and I think it's been a difference maker for the Wolverines.
We're talking with Aaron McMann, who covers Michigan for M Live. You mentioned maybe this is Michigan's best chance for a national title, but they also might be the college football world's best chance to knock off Georgia. Is that how you view this Michigan group as well? Because when you look at some of the other contenders, I'm not sure they've got what it takes. They might be more TCU than they were Ohio State against Georgia last year. Michigan, though, might be able with their physicality to give the Bulldogs a hiccup for the first time in 3 years. How do you, I know it's looking ahead here, but how do you look at their chances against a team like Georgia?
Yeah, it's a good question, right? And when engaging in the college football playoff matchups, I do think Michigan has the edge, against maybe a Florida State or a Washington or perhaps an Oregon. But Georgia is the interesting factor here. Michigan had trouble getting past them 2 years ago. I don't think they didn't have the physicality and I think the talent to keep up. I think that's changed this year. Now I don't think that necessarily means Michigan would be favored to beat the Bulldogs, but I think they'd give them a fight. And I think it's I think it's a matchup many folks are clamoring for, especially here in Ann Arbor. They want to see how this Michigan team matches up against Georgia. I will say this with regards to the Bulldogs. Michigan spent an inordinate amount of time this year preparing for them. I can remember before the 2021 season, before Michigan kind of flipped a switch and turned into this Big Ten title contender, they started obsessing over Ohio State, and it worked. Going into this year, they added a period in practice to prepare for Georgia. My assumption is that it deals with physicality and perhaps something with the run game. But I think Michigan's better equipped to handle the Bulldogs. Now, I don't know if that necessarily will translate to success on the field, but I think it'd be a lot closer in the 2021 matchup.
Aaron, looking ahead to this weekend, the Big Ten championship game against Iowa, as you kind of look at the point spread, it's large. It's about 23 points. I think it got up to. Did it open a little bit lower? I think it was around 21 when it opened. For Iowa to have a chance in this game, does Michigan just not have to show up?
Not only the point spread, what you said, 23-24, but the total for the game is more like 35.
Yeah, which is unbelievable. Unbelievable. Would you lay the points on Michigan, like as like a shutout favorite?
Yeah, my gut says yes, just because looking at that odds makers, I would signal to me they're expecting like a 30-3 game, and that's probably the most likely scenario here. Michigan's offense, I think, is so well equipped. I think for Iowa to be in this game, or at least be competitive, they're going to have to force some turnovers. They're going to have to get some short field situations. Going back to the playoff game last year against TCU, J.J. McCarthy threw a couple of pick sixes. So I think Iowa would need a couple of those to try and stay competitive. Otherwise, I'm tempted to lean to lay the points with Michigan. I think their offense is just so good and so explosive. And I think you're almost looking at a duplicate of what we saw in 2021, where Michigan jumped out to a big lead and never, it never closed.
Aaron, I'm glad you brought up that performance against TCU last year by J.J. McCarthy, because as he gets closer and closer to an opportunity to be able to, I guess, redeem himself a little bit there, because let's be honest, Michigan wins that game without those two pick sixes. I guess, how do you think he's handled that mentally, not only throughout the season, but now as his chance to get back on that stage is right at his fingertips?
Yeah, so he says he's grown from it, and you want to believe him, but then you go back to even this season, the second game against Bowling Green, and he throws 3 interceptions. But by and large, you look at JJ's numbers, he's been very good, but it almost seems like he gets into this rut when he throws one interception in a game. It kind of multiplies, and it almost like runs downhill from there. So I think the key from him is just staying away from mistakes. If he can avoid 1 turnover, he can avoid 3. And I think that would be the really only difference maker for Iowa, because I just don't see their offense doing a ton. Michigan's defense is statistically one of the best in the country. They're very good at keeping teams, forcing them in second and long, third and long situations. And given, Iowa's, they're playing their backup quarterback, they just don't have a ton of weaponry on the offense side of the ball. So I just don't see them moving the football a ton. But, JJ, again, the key is in avoiding mistakes, avoiding turnovers, playing it in a way safe. And I do expect that to probably be the Michigan game plan on Saturday. They can play their type of football, not force anything, and I think they're going to want to avoid injuries too, and that's going to be coming out of this game healthy. So I'm expecting a safe game for Michigan. I don't expect them to try. I expect them to try a ton of trick plays, just like you saw against Ohio State. They're going to try and get in and get out with a win.
Aaron, real quick here, got about 30 seconds left. Are you expecting Sharon Moore to be back next season, or do you think he moves on to a head coaching job?
Yeah, it's a good question, because if you look at Michigan's coaching staff, I think he's the most likely candidate to get a head coaching job, whether that's this year or next. The only question, right, is whether he ends up being the next guy in line. If Jim Harbaugh ends up taking an NFL job this offseason, I would assume he gets the job at Michigan. So it's going to be a very interesting offseason with Harbaugh and the staff.
Aaron, we appreciate your time. Great stuff, and enjoy covering the game this weekend.
Thanks, guys.
Hey, thanks, Aaron.
That's Aaron McMann from M Live covering Michigan football. Really good stuff there from Aaron. Lots going on with Michigan.
I still, I was just thinking about this when you asked the question about Georgia. I'm like, is Michigan the only team that's solidified in the college football playoff?
We'll talk about that tomorrow here on Hurrdat Sports Radio.